Welcome to Beyond the Beige, and thanks for being part of this today. I'm Andrew Seal, co-founder of GoStart. I've been working in digital and social since the very early days. Now, we created this summit because something huge is happening to content. AI has given us everyone more speed, more output, and more capability. But it's also created a wave of sameness. Everything's faster, but it's also flatter. And that's the problem. Because when everything sounds the same, we're trusting less, we feel less, we remember less. And the people who should stand out are disappearing into the beige. So, this event is a line in the sand, a chance to pause and ask a different question. What does it mean to create, to influence, to show up as a human when AI can write, post, and publish for everyone? Now, this isn't an anti AI summit. AI is incredible. It's changed how we work, how we think, how we create. But if we want originality, trust, and creativity to survive, we're going to need a smarter partnership between humans and the machines. We've brought together some of the sharpest thinkers in marketing, creativity, neuroscience, and leadership to explore how we keep content bold, distinctive, and unmistakably human. And you're part of this movement too. So all the way through this summit, you can join the conversation in the LinkedIn chat, share what stands out for you, push back on what doesn't. Tell us how this lands in your world. It's not a passive event, it's an investigation. You could say a creative rebellion, and it's the start of something we're building together. So let's get started. Our first speaker sets the tone for everything that follows. When we talk about AI and the future of marketing, it's easy to jump straight into tools and tactics. Now, our first guest has spent years reminding the industry of something more fundamental. In the long run, the most human company wins. Mark Schaefer is a globally respected marketing futurist and best-selling author whose work has shaped how a generation of marketeers think about community, creativity, and trust in a digital world. In this opening session, Mark explores why brands that dare to be authentic, emotional, and connected will define the next era of marketing, and how AI can amplify, not replace, what makes us human. Mark, it's fantastic to have you here today. You open your book Audacious with that story about people stepping out of a restaurant just to watch an advert in the sky. Now, it's a reminder of how rare real attention has become. So, with feeds now flooded with this AI generated content, what does it take for a brand to earn genuine attention today?
Well, I think in your introduction there, you really nailed it. This is the question on everyone's mind, or maybe there's two questions embedded there. Number one is, where do we fit? And number two, what does it take to stand out? So the book really is sort of a call to arms for people because, I do think there's a place for humanity in this AI dominant world. I know there is. And I think the short answer, and we can, dissect different elements of the book, but
Mm,
the short answer is that what we all try to do with our businesses is we're trying to create some meaning, some connection to our customers or our potential customers or our audience or our fans. And I think in this environment, art will persist. So, art is an expression of the human experience. And so we may hear a song replicated by AI that sounds like our favorite band. My favorite band is Radiohead. Now,
yep.
I'm not going to uh, go to pay money to a concert to listen to a robot play Radiohead. But I love that band. I love their music. I'd probably travel halfway across the world and pay several $100s for a ticket to see this band that I love. And it's the same with our favorite authors, our favorite artists, And so that humanity will persist. And it suggests that in a professional environment, our content, the way we connect with customers, we must show our humanity. That's our point of differentiation. We must have the courage to dig down deep and show ourselves, our passion, our compassion, our vulnerability, which is a
Mm,
very unusual word in the business context.
yeah.
But I think that's what it's going to take.
I mean, what does it take to break through when everything looks and sounds the same?
I think this is actually good news, and I know that sounds weird, but the bar is so low. I start off the book more or less setting the business case for here is the current state. And I refer to some wonderful research by my friends at System One in the UK. And they put 60,000 marketing and advertising campaigns through a panel of real humans. And the numbers ended up something like for 2/3 of our corporate messaging, it either has no emotional resonance whatsoever or people were disgusted by it. Now, if there was a
Incredible.
CEO in charge of the global advertising and marketing industry, they'd be fired because it's terrible results. And if you look at most industries, it's just boring. It's this pandemic of dull. There's this
Mm.
expectation of bland, and there's a country club of boring in many industries that we're boring because everybody else is boring. We don't really want to rock the ship. We're afraid to do something new or different. And so the my book is for people and companies that are going to refuse to be ignored. And to do that, you've got to find a way to overcome this fear. And I hope I can do that in this book because there's so many fun case studies. There's something for everybody in this book to say, oh, wow, we could do that.
You mentioned also the idea of kind of competence is the new mediocrity. You
Yes.
know,
I mean, most people feel good about being competent, but AI is competent. And if you're competent, you're vulnerable. AI is going to be coming after you, and it already is. We're seeing, we're starting to see layoffs, here in America and, other parts of the world. We're seeing a decline in entry level jobs. And so we've got to find a new way to compete.
we talked about the Sky advert at the start. But is there another brand or campaign that's genuinely surprised you recently? Something that's really broken the pattern.
Well, there's so many because what's happening is that um, the book has done very, very well, and I'm grateful for that. So there's thousands of people around the world that have read the book, and now they're sending me their case studies.
Oh, really? Brilliant.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean, they're like, there's like new people are sending me things, every day that are making me go, wow, wow, wow. That's really cool. I think the one that has surprised me the most, and this is this is one that I think I'm trying to remember if I mentioned it in the book or if it happened after the book. I think I mentioned it in the book, and it's this um, sort of obscure cookie brand called Nutter Butter. Now, Nutter Butter is a peanut butter cookie that maybe we got in our lunches when we were children, but everybody's kind of forgot about it. And so, about a year ago, the company started posting these videos on TikTok that can only be described as an LSD fever dream. I mean, they're incoherent. And for
Okay.
anyone listening to your program, I encourage you to go to like YouTube
Mhm.
and Google Nutter Butter videos. And so it just seems random and almost like a little horrifying. And you think this is a weird way to sell a cookie. And here's what's happened. Their sales have tripled in the last
Wow.
12 months. And I think part of that is that so many people, especially young people today, are just so hungry for something that's different, something that's conversational. And one of my favorite videos was from Nutter Butter. There was some influencer that posted a video on TikTok that said, "Are you? I'm worried about you, Nutter Butter. Are you sure you're okay?" And Nutter Butter posted a video back specifically for that influencer and said, "Yes, we're okay," and proceeded to have another LSD fever dream. So
Brilliant.
it's playful, um, and there are like certain repeating characters and phrases that will are sort of like emerging into
Mm.
a narrative, and it's going to be really interesting to see how they sustain it. But I mean, for me, it was totally unexpected, just a huge risk, I think. I mean, I cannot imagine the CMO looking at these videos for the first time saying, "Oh yeah, that's what our cookie's all about." But in a way, I mean, they're like, they don't have any meaning. They have nothing to lose. So, I mean, could Oreo pull that off? No.
Mm.
No. But look, if you're number 6
Mm.
and nobody really cares, and you've got an opportunity to reconnect with young people who love those cookies anyway, why not go for it?
That ties neatly into something else in Audacious, your idea of awe. You describe awe as one of the most overlooked opportunities in marketing, those small emotional moments that stop people scrolling. So, like for everyday brands without big budgets or flashy campaigns, what does everyday awe look like for them?
Well, I want to emphasize that I pay special attention to the case studies I used in the book, that there is something for everyone. Yes, there's, the LSD fever dreams, actually, they're probably not that expensive to produce.
Probably not actually.
Yeah, you just have to have like a little bit of a horrifying personality, I think. But there is something for everybody, including, ideas that from people and organizations that have like zero budget. And this idea of everyday awe, it's this idea of collective effervescence. It's this contagion of joy that happens when you bring people together. So just like a simple example of this is, I mentioned Radiohead. So if I'm
Mm.
listening to Radiohead through my earphones, or listening in the car, I might, nod my head and tap my foot along to the music. But if I'm at a concert with my friends, we're going to be singing out loud and dancing and just, probably embracing each other. There's something unique and special that happens when you bring people together. It creates this collective effervescence, creates this feeling of everyday awe. And we live in a world that's lonely. We see it in
Mm.
the news all the time, record levels of depression, record levels of isolation. And our customers, and it's not just young people, it's across
Mm.
generations. And our customers are longing to belong. And this is something that I think is a great opportunity for businesses to bring people together to experience awe. The example I use in my book, which again is it costs nothing really, is I have a retreat every year, and it's a small retreat for marketing leaders called the Uprising. We go to a lodge, in the forest, and it's a lovely place. And, you know, so when I ask people afterwards, give me a rating of, the event and the food and everything. And the feedback is always good. And I know I've done a good job creating a meaningful event for these people. But here's what always took me by surprise. Many people would say this was life-changing. And I thought, like, what is going on here? What is this? What's this thing I cannot put my finger on? And it's the awe. It's the collective effervescence that I mindfully and systematically mix people together in certain ways to create conversations so that people can build and create something together at this event that creates this awe. So, literally, my marketing plan for this event is add more awe. Find more ways to create that emotional contagion. Just to say, like I've seen moments where people are in conversation and then, it's time to move on to something else. And they end the conversation like with a hug. That doesn't happen at normal conferences. So I've really started to analyze how I do this through the lens of awe. And I think that's an interesting challenge, isn't it? Like, what would it look like for your event, for your marketing to add more awe? And it doesn't really take excuse me, more money. It takes more intent. It takes you,
Yeah.
it's just, you got to look at every way you can to bring people together in a new and meaningful way.
Does this require a degree of courage? I mean, because for a lot of businesses, especially in B2B, being audacious means stepping one outside their comfort zones. I mean, you've said the real risk today isn't failure, it's invisibility. So, what actually stops organizations being bolder? What blocks the courage to experiment?
Well, I think some companies have a good reason to be conservative because they're in a regulated industry and maybe they're limited in what they can do. I still think there's more that they can do, that it's more a function of fear. And I think that's the way it is with most companies, is that we create something boring, even though in our hearts we want to do more and we want to experiment. But we know boring can get approved by the legal department. So we just take the easy way out. Or we know boring, being competent is good enough to keep our job or to keep our customer. But I mean, that is going to catch up to us. It really is. And I think the main reason is fear. And also, I think another reason is often some of these new ideas are harder to measure.
Mm,
So look, I'm a measurement person. I love measuring and dashboards, and I believe in that. But we also live in a world where the expectation is cultural relevance, especially on something like TikTok. I mean, TikTok has become such a phenomenon.
yeah.
It's become such a source of culture. It's become a tastemaker. And to be relevant on TikTok, you have about a day.
Yes.
And all you can do is react. You basically have 24 hours to react to whatever's going on there, and then it's over. So that does not lend itself to campaigns. That does not lend itself to reflection and assessment. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. And my recommendation is, look, a lot of companies have built their brands and built their reputation in a very solid way.
Mm.
And maybe it's easy to measure. But take 10% of your budget and experiment and think through, if we try this thing on TikTok, or if let's say we had an experiential event that might be hard to measure. Or what if we tried something around word of mouth marketing, which is one of my biggest frustrations because we know it works. We know it's the most trusted, purest, most unadulterated form of marketing that is completely untouched by AI. And yet, I've never worked with a company, and I've worked with a lot, that have had a line item in their marketing budget for word of mouth marketing. Why not? So try, just experiment and sort of think through, well, if this works, this is what we think would happen. And then if that happens, double down, try a little more.
I mean, do you find many companies don't even have a small experimental budget?
No, and so this really started with me, this whole frustration. I wrote a book in 2019 called Marketing Rebellion. And this has been, a beloved book. It's been my best-selling book. And it was a wake-up call. And in a way, it set the stage for everything else I've been writing since then. Because what I was experiencing is I'm going around the world and I'm meeting chief marketing officers and marketing teams from big companies and small companies and universities and nonprofits. And they're all saying, marketing, it just doesn't work like it used to. And the reason is because they just keep doing the same thing year after year after year. And they haven't looked up to see how the world really works. And they're rejecting the traditional ways of advertising. They don't want to be intercepted. They don't want to be interrupted. They don't, I mean, they don't want us, they don't want to give our email address because they know we're going to spam them. Right. And the spam for me has just gotten so bad. Even if I unsubscribe to something, I'm thinking, okay, if I unsubscribe, now they know that email is real and they're just going to use it for something else. So, we have abused our customers. And I think the customers collectively are just rising up and saying, respect me. And so my plea is if you're doing marketing that people don't like because you're abusing them and you're intercepting them, stop it and find ways that of marketing that people love. This was such a revelation to me when I wrote that book and I started giving a speech around the world. And I thought people would hate that book because what I'm saying is all the stuff you've been doing for the last 20 years, it's not working like it used to. And I thought people would hate it. And just the opposite happened. People said, yes, you've put a name to it. We know what we're doing doesn't work anymore. And this was, I'll never forget this moment. This was such a shock. I was giving a speech about these ideas. And at the end of the speech, I was filled with passion and, I was all worked up. and, and,
Okay.
and I said to the audience, if you're doing marketing that people hate, just stop. And they started to cheer.
Wow. Okay.
And 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 and, and I thought, wow, it's like people have been waiting to be liberated. And really, so all of my thinking, including, Audacious, is a way to sort of empower people and say, I know you want to do more. Here's the business case for doing more. Take this book to your boss and show your boss what's possible. Show your boss what the opportunity is. Show your boss that just like almost every industry, we're just boring and we could do better. And the bar isn't that high. If we could just be a little bit more audacious than the competition, we could have a win.
Let's bring this idea of courage into the world of employee voice. I mean, you talk about disrupting the storyteller, where employees or fans or customers become the real voice of the brand. Why do these unscripted voices build more trust than official messaging? And how can brands empower them without feeling like they're losing control?
Well, I think there's a tremendous amount of research that supports this that most businesses ignore. And the reason is because we love working with our advertising agency. We love being wined and dined. We love winning awards for our ads. And if you look at some of the stuff I'm talking about, like word of mouth marketing, all right, there's no trophy for that, right? I mean, you can't take a word of mouth marketing campaign home to show the family, oh, look at this great thing I did at work, right? So I mean, it's not very sexy, and it's unconventional, which is really why it works. But there's so much research. So just a couple data points.
Mhm.
So there's a very famous piece of research called the Edelman Trust Barometer,
Mhm.
and they look at trust in it's not just marketing and advertising, but just trust in institutions.
Mm.
And I think they do this in more than 20 countries now. And what they've shown is that trust in businesses, brands, and advertising has declined 15 years in a row. But people trust other people. We
Yep.
trust each other. We trust business executives. We trust human beings. We trust technical experts. We trust employees of the company because they're our neighbors. And so another data point. There was a very famous study that was done by Nielsen
Mm.
that showed that 92% of adults trust uh, a recommendation from a human,
Yep. I know that one.
even if it's a stranger, even if it's just a testimony or a review. We trust 92% trust that more than our marketing and advertising. So it suggests that the successful marketing mindset has to be doing something so interesting, so worthy, so conversational that people will take the story for us. We can write the script, but then hand the mic to other people because that's what people trust. And there's this one of the most important studies I think ever was this 10-year study done by McKinsey
Mm.
where they looked at 200,000 customer journeys and they found that 2/3 of our sales is occurring without us. They haven't seen an ad, they haven't interacted with our marketing. There's no branded content. They bought it because they got a recommendation from a human or they saw something on social media that people posted. And again, it demands that we change our view where instead of us holding the megaphone shouting about how great we are, that we create something so interesting that other people will talk about it. And again, this is something I first wrote about in 2019 in Marketing Rebellion. And so I guess it's a long-winded way to answer your question. I think companies and leaders, when they read it, they understand it, but are they really changing their cultures? It is so hard. It is really, really hard. There are changes. I mean, I'm seeing people that have taken my books and said, this is the way we're going to do it. This is what we're going to do now. But it's really hard to change, especially if you're a big global company where, you've got these obligations to big advertising companies
Mhm.
that, all they know to do is advertise.
I mean, one thing I loved in Audacious is your push to measure meaning rather than just numbers. You proposed the Audacity Index as a way to measure resonance, not just reach. Do you see any brands doing this well? Being genuinely audacious, human, and trusted? I mean, what are they measuring differently?
Well, I am a little proud of that um, because it is sort of a soft thing, right? It is
Mm.
sort of a woo woo kind of measure. Um, but I came up with this index, and it's relative, not absolute, because I recognize what's audacious for a law firm may be very different for someone that sells
Mm,
pizza.
mm,
But anybody can use this index. And so I came up with this idea, and I ran it by a couple like big agencies in New York, because I thought, well, look, let's let's see if this is realistic, if this is relevant to people who are in the trenches, trying to be audacious, trying to get their customers to be audacious. And they looked at what I had done, and they, had a few suggestions to tweak it a little bit. They said, "Yeah, this is pretty good. I think we can use this with our customers." So it's just a framework to encourage people just to take a step forward, just to experiment. It's really like, okay, did we try something different this month, or did we read the book, try one thing, and then go back into the country club of dull? Um, and I think having, I had the great, honor in my life of studying under Peter Drucker for a few years, and one of his favorite famous sayings was, "You can't manage it if you can't measure it."
mm.
And so this is a way to sort of have a scorecard of, are we trying? Are we trying? Are we taking a step forward? And it maybe can impact that culture that you and I talked about. So we'll see. I hope it works.
I mean, for people who haven't seen the index, what kind of things might they measure? Is it simply tracking those small experiments or trying something new each month?
Yeah. So I mean, there's five different factors, and it could be just, and the reason why it's applicable to everybody is because it's like, okay, we're going to try this thing. How much, on our scale, how much of this was a risk for our culture, right? So if you're an ad agency in New York, relatively speaking, that might be much different than if you're, a law firm, in some small town in
Yeah,
the middle of the country
absolutely.
or something like that. So it's something that everybody can use, but it's kind of like self-policing. Are we trying? Are we taking a risk? Did it work out like we thought? What kind of an impact did it have? So yeah, so it's just basically aimed at the culture.
So, to wrap up, if everyone watching took one audacious step tomorrow, something they could measure in the way that we've just discussed, in their content or their culture or their leadership, what would you suggest it be?
Well, one of the books that I mentioned today is Marketing Rebellion. And the subtitle of that book is The Most Human Company Wins. And I think that's a good starting point, is to think about, how can we be the most human company in our industry? And actually, I mean, that might be a combination of a real person and AI. There could be things that AI can help us with
Mm.
to be more attentive, to respond in a faster way, to free up time that real people can spend time with our customers. But think about, how do we show up as a person in every customer touch point? How do we show our smiles, our hearts, our passion for what we do in every email, in every complaint, in every negotiation, in every visit to our store? And how do we double down on that? I think that's the type of marketing people love, not the type of marketing that people hate. So double down on showing up as a real person who cares. And I think that's a great cultural foundation to win in your industry.
Mark, thank you. That was the perfect way to open Beyond the Beige. You've given us a clear challenge. If everyone has access to the same technology, humanity becomes a differentiator. Creativity, community, and trust are not soft ideas, they're strategic assets. I really, really appreciate you kicking us off today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being so prepared and asking me so many great questions.
Thank you. Before we move on, I'd love to hear you in the LinkedIn chat. What's one thing you want your company to be known for beyond efficiency? Just pop your answer in the chat, a word, sentence, whatever comes to mind. Next up, we go from human company to human thinking and what originality means when AI can generate content on tap. As AI floods LinkedIn with more content than ever, originality has become the real scarce resource. Our next guest spends a lot of time thinking and writing about that. Ashley Faus from Atlassian is widely known for her work on thought leadership, content strategy, and the difference between just publishing and actually thinking in public. In this session, we explore how real authority is built through clarity, curiosity, and depth. We talk about why you can't outsource the thinking and how AI can broaden your perspective without stealing your voice. Ashley, great to have you with us. I want to start with something you wrote about recently on LinkedIn: taste. You said taste is becoming one of the key creative skills in the age of AI, and that we're in a pattern recognition phase before we learn to break the rules. So, what does taste actually mean for marketeers today? And what does good taste look like?
I love this question because I'm seeing everybody. I feel like a year ago, the mantra was like, I'm not afraid of AI replacing me. I'm afraid of someone using AI replacing me. And now the mantra is, in an age where, creation is cheap, the defining human factor is taste, right? And so it's like we've suddenly discovered this thing that no one's ever thought about. And it's interesting because from my perspective, we have solved taste over and over and over throughout human history. We have managed to define it with rules in a variety of other industries in places that are hard to define it, like music, like art, like food, right? And it's funny because if someone is capable of creating something that the market rewards over and over and over again in music, in art, in food, whatever it is, then objectively they have found some sort of pattern that works. And even if
Mm.
that pattern is actually breaking the traditional rules, it means that there are rules that we all generally agree on. And there is kind of a right way to break them. And that's counterintuitive, but
Mm.
you see it. So it's super interesting in writing, for example, and this I think applies to a lot of marketers and the conversation with AI today. Anne Hanley actually just wrote a beautiful LinkedIn post. And again, if you read her writing, it's so good. Her writing is just excellent.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
she was
I'd
basically
agree.
saying she was defending the M dash, and she's like, M dashes are getting such a bad rap
No,
because
I read
everyone
that
thinks
post.
they're
Yeah,
indicative of AI. Yeah, and it's like she uses obviously the M dash very well because she's an expert writer, but she also uses sentence fragments, which are not grammatically correct, right?
mm.
A sentence fragment is missing either the noun or the subject or the verb or something, right? Like if you go back to the grammar rules. And yet, most excellent writers use run on sentences and fragments.
Mm.
And yet, the writing is beautiful and clear and concise, right? So I don't think we have actually discovered the rules that already exist from a marketing perspective. The current trend is authenticity, right? And it's like, well, what does it mean to be authentic? And like, let's put this out there. And you can, it's more of a feeling, it's more of an energy or a vibe, and like not in a woo-woo kind of way. Like you can tell when someone is engaged and listening and those kinds of things. We can fake it. This is another interesting thing I've talked about where I don't have children, but I have nieces and nephews, and I watch my siblings teach their children empathy, kindness, being
Mm.
polite, caring for other kids, right? You have to share. And we know that offering your toy is indicative of being kind to other people. So if these are skills that we can teach with language, we teach them please, we teach them thank you, right? Then that means that we could also teach AI to kind of be empathetic or be authentic,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
I don't think we've discovered the hard rules quite yet of what taste in marketing means in the age of AI, but I think we have patterns of this from other industries and from other ways of interacting that we will start to see kind of the rules and then the breaking of the rules in expert ways emerge probably in the next couple of years. I don't think, I think we're still going to have the whole conversation of like, what is taste? What are the rules? How can you break the rules? Right. I think that conversation is the conversation for the next like 12 months. And then beyond that is when we actually start to see, uh, you know, the true taste emerge and being codified. The AI basically looked across all of the human created content. A number of really excellent writers used the M dash. And so AI was like, haha, the M dash is how the good writers do it. I shall use the M dash. And then a bunch of people who are not actually good writers and don't understand the purpose of the M dash were like, haha, AI wrote it and it just sounds robotic. And so because the rules were broken in the wrong way, now all of a sudden everyone hates M dashes and all of the good writers who were like, whoa, 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 and
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
stole
Yeah.
the M dash from me. Like, AI did not invent the M dash. I was a good writer before this nonsense, and now you've ruined it for me, robots.
This sense of exploring and curiosity connects to something you've talked a lot about, seeing marketing not as a funnel, but as a playground. In your work on human centered marketing, you describe the audience journey as a playground rather than a linear path. I mean, what do you mean by a playground? And how does that mindset change how we think about creativity, especially now that AI sits inside the process?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things. I think from a sales and marketing perspective, we're finally starting to see the conversation shift where it's like the buyer is in control and, you know, particularly in the age of AI, it's like everyone's searching via LLM. So how do we show up in an LLM?
Mm.
And it's like in a lot of the same ways that you should have been showing up before AI came on. Um, People have never wanted to be hunted and captured and locked down in a deal. We use this adversarial language to talk about the people. It's like these are humans behind the screen. Like I'm a human, you're a human, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's the first thing is this idea that we're going to go in this linear fashion and we're going to force people down this linear funnel. That has never been the case. We just haven't had a good model to replace it. And so that's why I
Mm.
propose the playground and treating the audience journey as a playground. From my perspective, even starting the fact like a customer journey map. And I'm like, that, okay, that's fine. If we want to actually constrain it to customers, that means we are looking at a subset of the audience that went on this journey and actually became, you know, a closed
Yeah.
one booked customer. If you want to call it a customer journey map, then you have to be clear we are talking about customers. And then inevitably, the first step of that customer journey map starts with prospect lands on our website.
No.
Okay, on one hand, now that we've constrained this to customers for our journey map, fine, I'll allow you to call them prospects. They did not start on our website. They came from somewhere. I mean, did they come
Mm.
from Google? Did they come from social? Did they come from an LLM? Did they come from a conversation where, oh, I was talking with my friend Andrew about Atlassian. And so now I've gone to Atlassian.com, right? Like
Mm.
I came from somewhere, even if that somewhere is difficult for the brand to track. So as we think about this from a playground perspective, if, again, I've got nieces and nephews, right? They don't go slides, then swing, then merry-go-round every single time. Sometimes they skip the merry-go-round. What about, you know, their parents who are sitting on the park bench watching them play? Are they using the playground the wrong way? Of course not. And inevitably, right, my nephew wants to go up the slide instead of down the slide. And so as we think
Absolutely.
about this from an audience perspective, the idea that the only way you can go through the journey is slides and then swing and then down, you know, like, or whatever, I guess slides were at the beginning. So you have to go down the slide and then you have to walk to the merry-go-round and then you go one time around and then you're going to sit quietly on the park bench for 10 minutes, right? Like That's absurd.
Can
Sometimes
you
the kids
imagine?
just want
Yeah.
to sit on the park bench the whole time, right? Our audience is the same way. And so we have to create these paths that allow them to go up, down, and sideways and use content the wrong way. So one of the things I talk about is pricing. Pricing is traditionally considered a bottom of funnel or conversion level or
Mm.
purchase level conversation. But if you're trying to secure budget to even have that conversation, right? Like somehow you're not even in the funnel at all. And from a
Mm.
brand perspective, you wouldn't be in the awareness phase if you're asking for prices. Like clearly you're
No.
aware, but if you don't have budget, you literally can't get into a consideration or purchase discussion. But if you're asking about budget, then you're aware? Like, wait, and so again, like that's that example. It's the funnel starts to break very quickly. And then same thing, obviously, from an LLM perspective, having people query and say, what's the best project management software that includes these 5 criteria is very different than Atlassian versus a competitor, which is how they might Google in the past, or
Yeah.
just searching like best project management software. And then obviously as Atlassian, we want to put up a page that is literally titled why Atlassian is the best project management software, right? And then we would potentially have all of our competitor pages so that if they Google Atlassian versus a competitor, they land on our competitor page and they can compare them. That's not how people are searching. They're searching more robust. And so by the time the LLM gives them that information, they may have gotten all of the information they need before they ever click on a website or click to speak to a salesperson. They've made that decision, and it's very hard for us to track or see because that lives in the LLM. It effectively lives in a third party. It doesn't live on our website, so we can't track,
Well, the Google
which class
summaries as
they
well.
win.
There's that as well. Okay, so as we shift from funnels to playgrounds, it naturally ties into how we share ideas, which brings us to thought leadership. I mean, you've said previously you can't outsource the thinking. In your view, what separates real thought leadership from smart content, especially now that AI can churn out so much of the latter?
So thought leadership is a subset of smart content. So if we go back to those intents, right? Helping the user or the audience or the customer, again, depending on what you're doing, solve a problem, you need to do that in a smart way. But frequently, that is existing problems with existing or maybe small incremental solutions, right? If I can explain something to you in a simple, concise way that allows you to immediately fix your problem, I have delivered smart content to you. I have not delivered thought leadership to you, right? So
Okay.
the key differentiator is that thought leadership helps the audience think and act in a new way, in a different direction. And so if you've never considered the problem of people, we'll take this AI thing, right? When this shift kind of started to happen, Amanda Natividad actually coined this term zero-click content. And this was prior to AI, but this was the idea. She actually framed it more in terms of like social media, right? A lot of those platforms either penalize clicks off platform
Like LinkedIn.
or
Yeah.
don't, they don't even allow it, right? Like Instagram, you still can't put a link in a post. You have to do
Mhm.
link in bio, right? LinkedIn, it's a whole thing. Who knows what the algorithm is doing? But I think we all agree that in general, LinkedIn penalizes putting links in posts, right? And
Mhm.
it's not just from an algorithm perspective. Humans don't like it either, right? How often are you reading? You're like, oh my gosh, this is super interesting. And it's like, click here to watch my webinar, right? Or click here to read the full article. And you're like, no, why? Right? So it's not, the platforms are greedy and humans are lazy.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to stay right where they already are. And so Amanda, and again, this is like her thought leadership, right? She coined this term. It was a new idea of zero-click content. And so optimizing for platform native content obviously fundamentally shifts how you create and how you measure. Now in the age of AI, this concept of zero-click searches,
Mm.
zero-click information is even more relevant. And so how you address that problem, the idea that you have zero-click content, like that is kind of the new insight. How you address it, if you say, okay, you need to be present on these other platforms, you need to be elevating the people and building trust with the people, because that's how the LLMs look for kind of trustworthy content.
Mhm.
Many of the same fundamentals from an SEO perspective still
Mm.
apply from an LLM perspective. the core of kind of white hat SEO or modern SEO is that it's not just good for the machines, it's also good for the humans. I'd say like black hat or old school SEO with like optimized just for the machines. And it's like, well, in theory, the machines are in service of the humans. So if it's good for the machine, it's probably good for the human to have clear page hierarchy, for example, to have clear keywords so that the topic is clear, right? So that's the difference between smart content and thought leadership is smart content helps the audience solve a problem today using existing solutions. Thought leadership helps them think and act in a new direction. And in some cases, because it's a new idea, it gives them language to then go search for potential solutions to this problem.
But you also said that being contrarian isn't enough. It has to help people act differently. But how do you test if an idea actually does that? If someone's trying to build their thought leadership skills, how do they know when an idea genuinely shifts thinking?
So there's a couple ways to do this. I think the first, that's like a little exercise that I tell people to run through. Take something in your industry or in your problem space that really irks you, right? Like what's something where you're constantly just kind of ranting against it. And then the next step is what is the slightly unhinged thing you would do to solve that problem, right? And right there, you're probably starting to get into the contrarian space where you're kind of like, I would just do the opposite. And you're like, okay, cool. You've got now your spiky point of view is a way to put this, or you've got potentially your new thought of like, here's a thing I think should change. Here's the crazy thing I would do to change it. Okay. Walk that back a couple steps. What's realistic to actually make this change? And how did you get to the point where you realize this thing is not working? You actually have started to take some steps to try to change it. You've shared some of those steps with other people. You're actually getting results from it. That's how you start to get to this thought leadership piece. So, for example, how I ended up at the playground. One thing that bugs me to no end is gated content. Like I just fundamentally don't like it. I think I did it earlier in my career. I think it produces a false sense of security and a false sense of optimism about how many people are actually interested. It leads to bad marketing because you're basically like, I'm going to nurture you. No, you're not. I'm going to chase you down and harass you until you either block me or buy from me. Like, right? Neither of those are good. And so I fundamentally, I was just like, I hate gated content, right? All right. What's the unhinged thing I would do? Naturally, I would just ungate all content. I would never gate any content ever. You want the information? It's here. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to give me an email address. You don't have to DM me. You don't have to comment, nothing. You just get it for free, right? I work in a large enterprise company. I am under no illusions that I will ever be able to convince my entire company to ungate all content forever, right? It's not going to happen. Okay. But what does it look like if I walk it a few steps back? And how did I get to that idea of kind of I hate gated content? What's the core issue? And for me, the core issue is friction. And so where does that
Okay.
friction come from? Well, it comes from forcing people down a linear funnel. Okay, well, if it's not a linear funnel, then what is the buying process like, right? And so that then gets me to start thinking, if I'm going to say we should ungate all content, then that means that I fundamentally think that the way we put information out there in a buying process is wrong. That stems from the linear funnel model, or in SaaS, the looping decision journey, right? So if I don't think either of those models are the right way, because fundamentally they introduce friction, what do I think is the right way? And that then sends me down the path of being like, oh, maybe it's this. Well, that doesn't work because of these caveats. Okay, it's this thing over here. Well, actually, that actually kind of works. All right, let's go down that path. And then I tell it to someone, and is their gut reaction, ooh, no, I don't like it, or it doesn't make sense, or like, but what about these 10 caveats, right? If I don't have answers for those caveats, or I can't find answers for those caveats, maybe my idea is not useful or not helpful or whatever. But if I say it and you're like, ooh, I like that. What about this other thing? All right, now
Yeah.
we've got something where we've got momentum, right? And so you have to be willing to share the ideas. Like I had something, I came up with this little like 2x2 matrix, and I was like, I put it on LinkedIn. I was like, I think I have a solution, but I don't actually know what the problem is. What do you guys think this solves? And the comments were all over the place. There were several people who were like, I don't think it solves anything. And like the axes are interesting. I don't really know how they're related. And like, sorry, when you mean this in the right quadrant, what are you talking? And I was like, okay, nope, haven't found a solution. Like, I'm sketching things out and I think I've stumbled on something and I have not, right? And so you have to be willing to put your ideas out there and get that feedback. This codifying the ideas and then giving it to other people to test and make sure that it actually works in their context or based on their understanding.
The curiosity piece keeps coming back, and so does transparency. You said the words learn more are toxic for trust, and that transparency is marketing's most human trait. So, how does transparency shape originality and audience trust in the age of AI? And how is that playing out now?
Yeah. So there's a couple things. I think as we discussed this myth that educational content is the best content, and so we twist ourselves into pretzels to try to make everything learn intent content. That extends to our CTAs. We're going to put learn more, and then haha, it's actually a contact sales, form. If you want to, you're on a pricing page, you want to learn more about pricing, you have to contact sales, and I'm just like, I haven't learned anything, like, give me the information. So. Learn more. If you're going to use that, it needs to truly link or expose learn intent content that does not require the audience to give you something in exchange to get access to this. And it needs to actually teach them something, right? It can't go to a sales form. It can't go to a gated form to fill out a white paper or whatever it is. So use explicit CTAs, watch the video, contact sales, download the asset, sign up for the webinar, sign up for our newsletter. All of that, see pricing, and then it actually takes you to a pricing page where you at least have, fair enough. Once you get into enterprise levels, particularly in the B2B space, you might have negotiating room and you might need to get a custom quote, but like, tell me, am I looking at 4 figures, 5 figures, 6 figures? Like what deal level am I dealing with here before I, give me some information. So that's the first thing, is using explicit CTAs maintains that trust over time. And it's good for the audience and it's good for the company, right? Because if that means if I give you the option not to buy and you choose to take a buying action, you meant to do that. I didn't trick you into buying any. I cannot trick you into buying anything. And if I force you down a buying path when you're not ready to buy, that's on me. When sales is angry that the leads are not actually leads, and it's because marketing forced somebody down a buying path when they just needed to get some basic information, that's my fault. That's not the audience's fault, right? So that every moment builds that trust. And we talk about this from a brand perspective, that the brand is the overall experience and perception in the mind of the customer, the audience, or the market. And that is built with every single interaction. And so even in small ways, those CTA buttons lying, because that's what's happening, lying to the audience breaks their trust. And so now they want to stay as far away from the brand as they can, because they know as soon as they take any action that signals that they might be considering looking at a tool, suddenly we're going to come in hard, right? So I think that's the first thing, is being very transparent to say, like, here's what's going to actually happen when you click this button. And then I think that extends all the way through the audience experience. If I convince you or I show you that I will be explicit with my communication and I will answer your questions up front, it's likely that I've taken that same mindset into, let's say, the onboarding experience for a product. So I don't know how many times you've logged into a product and it's confusing and you're just like, okay, the buying process was actually super simple. I'm very confused that now I've landed in this product and I have no idea what to do. There's no onboarding, there's no documentation, there's nothing, right? So that then extends into the onboarding process of making it intuitive so that they're not constantly having to go back into that helper remediation intent because they can't use it in the first place, right?
So much of this goes back to what you said earlier. Most systems have been built for tracking, not humans, which brings me to the human element. If AI can write and optimize, what still makes a human worth following? or to borrow your line, what does it mean when you say humans are the antidote to AI insanity?
So, first off, I think this is kind of a two-part question because the AI is not just independently doing things by itself. A human has asked it to help solve a problem, whether that's articulating an idea, whether that's understanding data, whether that's optimizing, by spitting out recommendations, right? Ultimately, a human is using a tool. AI is not just off magically producing things by itself. Like, it's not independent. And I think that's another thing
Mm,
where people personify AI in a way that makes it
mm,
independent from humans, and it is not. It is a tool. It does not behave independently. It does not think independently. It does not find problems and solve problems independently. A human gives it a problem space or asks it for a solution or prompts it or whatever. So that's the first thing. The second thing, it cannot form relationships. So I remember actually in the early days of AI, right? LinkedIn implemented this feature. I assume it still has it, but maybe all of us ranted about it enough that they finally took it away. But literally, you would go to message someone on LinkedIn and it would auto generate. And it said it's like auto generating
mm,
a message of
mm.
like, hey, Andrew, it's been a long time. How are you? That's freaking weird. Like, first of all, I would never say that. Second of all, the first time this happened to me, I was actually messaging somebody who I know from Twitter. I know we're supposed to call it X. No one knows what that is. We're calling it Twitter for clarity.
Yeah.
So I had been messaging with this person and we knew each other from Twitter. And so obviously, LinkedIn does not have the context and access to all of my Twitter messages. And so if I had come in and said, hey, Andrew, long time, you'd be like,
Whoa.
weren't we just talking last week on Twitter? Like, didn't
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just see you at a conference? Right. And on one hand, the response to that is, well, that's not fair. AI can't know. And I'm like, there it is. There it is. It cannot have the context of the relationship that humans have. You and I have now spent time together face to face. You see how I behave on video. You see my energy. If I suddenly showed up or if I suddenly on this call started speaking to you like this, and so if I was then telling you this or that, you'd be like, did something happen? Like, did you just get a notification that your dog died? Like, what suddenly happened that you're not looking me in the eye, you're not gesticulating, your voice is not modulating, like something is fundamentally wrong, right? And I've had this experience. I actually had an in-person experience. I was doing an interview with somebody at Inbound, came off a call, showed up to this interview, and immediately they were like, "Are you okay? You seem low off," and like they immediately knew that I was not my usual self because
Right.
they
Yeah.
know me. And
Mm,
so that ability to make the connection, that ability to have the full context, that ability to build the relationship, that is something that you cannot do with AI. And again, it is a tool, right? Like we've got to remember that this is a tool that is
mm,
meant to help us solve problems. It is not an independent force that is meant to push us out of our jobs. And so that ability to solve interesting problems and have that relationship with humans, that's why it still makes it worth it to follow a human. Find the people who their perspective helps you improve. Their energy helps you think more positively or fires you up to go solve a problem or makes you feel happy. Again, I know there's some people who their whole kind of vibe is like edgy or contrarian or like skeptical. I personally don't like to steep myself in that, right? And so
mm,
I go
mm,
find the people that are like, nah, we can do it, or yeah, let's work hard to figure it out, right? And so finding the people, in terms of the voice and tone that are what you want to continue
mm,
to grow in yourself, that's something that only humans can do. Because again, if I get in a negative spiral, like the LLM is going to match my voice, right? And so if I'm just like spiraling, then the LLM is going to be like, yeah, that sucks. You're right. Everything is bad. And now I'm just like in this terrible thought spiral, right? Versus I get on with you and you're smiling and you're asking questions and you're engaging with me as I talk. This is a very energizing conversation and gets us both into a better problem
mm.
solving path and
Absolutely.
creative headspace, right?
Okay, before we wrap up, one practical question for everyone watching. If someone wants to sound a bit more original today, going back to this idea of originality, what's one small thing they could do differently in how they think, write, or share?
This kind of dovetails both in how they think and how they write, and that's including stories. It's lived experience. So, from a super tactical way, I mentioned this before of saying in my experience or from my perspective, or I recently did or attended or engaged or read. I did this thing or I experienced this thing does two things. One, it grounds it in your actual experience, which is unique and not something that AI or any other human can replicate. And then two, it diffuses the skepticism because it's like, yeah, it's your lived experience. Like, of course you have this thought, right? So that's the first thing is really thinking about your own lived experiences or your own thoughts about something. And then the second thing is being willing to actually share that from a personal perspective. So when I released my book, I could have just said, today is book launch day, right? Like my book is now available for purchase. Please buy it. And that's fine. People would have done that. Instead, what I did is I opened with, I was published for the first time when I was in second grade. I had written this article and it got published in this monthly magazine. And I actually misspelled the word season 2 different ways because I was in second grade, right? Fast forward, 30 years. And I'm very proud to say that, I'm published again, this time for real. And I'm pretty sure I've caught all the typos, but if you catch any, let me know, right? And then basically saying, I actually am like friends with my second grade teacher on Facebook, and I can't wait for her to see a copy of my official book, right? That grabs you much more than me just telling you that I wrote a book. It tells you that I've been honing my craft and I had some stumbles along the way, and what a funny, heartwarming story. And wow, like I too, when I published my book, wish that my, English teacher who was hard on me and graded my papers harshly could see me now, right? It gives that emotional thing. And so that's the piece of it where like that's a funny story.
Ashley, thank you so much. That was a really energizing conversation. Your distinction between smart content and true thought leadership, and your point that taste and curiosity are skills that we can keep developing even in an AI world. They give everyone here something concrete to work with. So I really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
So take a moment and drop this into the chat, LinkedIn chat. What does original thinking mean for you in your role? And what's getting in the way of it? More to the point. Quick sentence or a thought would be great if you can. So now we're going to shift gears from thinking to the brain itself, and why some ideas stick while beige content just slides off. If beige content feels forgettable, it's because, at a brain level, it usually is. Our next guest is here to explain why. Dr. Carmen Simon is a cognitive neuroscientist and chief science officer at Corporate Visions. She studies what the brain actually responds to and why emotion, story, and distinctiveness create memories where sameness doesn't. So, in this session, Carmen reveals what actually happens in the brain when content lands. She explains why neutral, generic messaging just gets forgotten and shows how simple shifts in contrast and emotion make your work far more memorable. Carmen, it's wonderful to have you here today. You've shown that people act on what they remember, not what they see in the moment. So when we say beige content doesn't stick, what's actually happening in the brain when something fails to be remembered?
I like that question a lot because we've been talking about what constitutes good content. And from a neuroscience perspective and a business perspective, good content must be memorable content. And the reason for that is because memory influences decisions. Every single thing that you do, consciously or subconsciously, is based on what you remember, not on what you forget. And we're not making the proposition that every single piece of content must be memorable long term. Sometimes you're creating something and it's just for now, and it is transitory content. But at some point, you are faced with a situation where you want something to linger and influence behavior in some way. In that case, you must develop memorable content. So then we ask the question, well, how do we know what is memorable and how do we create it? And from that standpoint, when I look to see how the brain reacts to that which is beige versus that which is not, in this case, you'll see how it's more literal than metaphorical. I typically use a combination of these biometric tools that you see in this image. In this case, the person who is wearing the gear is a buyer and he is in the market for a software solution. The content in this case is not really all that relevant to the conversation. Picture this to be your typical marketing created presentation that is designed for a commercial context.
Okay.
In this case, the presentation was delivered virtually. He's seeing the presenter that you're noticing in the upper right corner of the screen.
Okay.
So on his scalp, I have an EEG cap. EEG stands for an electroencephalogram signal. This just simply means that as you're faced with a stimulus, your brain creates various brain waves that differ in terms of amplitude and frequency. And then we look to see where some of those frequencies appear in the brain, and we associate those with some cognitive processing like attention and motivation to keep going, and how fatigued, I'll know how fatigued he gets, and I'll know if in some parts that content has more of a cognitive workload versus in other parts. So there are some cognitive variables. And then, of course, there are some affective variables. So on his chest, I have an electrode for an electrocardio signal. An electrocardiogram, if this is something that you've done in a hospital, if you've ever had an EKG, it's this exact same signal,
Yeah.
except they call it by the sexier German name. So we have an EEG, we have an ECG signal. On the wrist and the fingers, you're seeing another device called a GSR. This stands for galvanic skin response. And that too measures an emotional arousal signal. You still don't know if the arousal is provoked by something that is positive or negative. And the same for the eye tracker, which is the fourth signal that I capture. So on the computer itself, there is an eye tracker. Sometimes I'll ask people to wear the actual glasses. And the reason for that is because typically you look to where you think. So there's a connection between visual attention and cognitive processing. So it's this combination that enables us to get to implicit reactions from the brain and body to content. And before any experiment, no exception, which is why I love the name of your show so much, I ask people to look at either physically a beige wall or a beige screen. And the reason for that is because I want to see a baseline of that brain. I want to see what the brain is like in an unstimulated state. So then we look to see if there are some statistically significant differences between that beige wall, that baseline, and the stimulus itself, the content itself. And quite often, we do not observe any statistically significant differences between the two, which means we have a lot of opportunities to beat the beige wall.
Do you think part of the problem with AI and automation is that it smooths away the very things our brains use as memory cues?
It's possible because if you're outsourcing too much of your power and too many of your skills to the machine, and that machine has already been based on that which is by nature average, then what you get back is very close to that beige wall. So one thing that we have to clarify, though, is that the beige wall and beige content in general as a metaphor is not always bad. You still need some beige in order to enable something to stand out. Because if everything was vying for your attention, it was that vibrant, then nothing would stand out. So for a moment, we have to pay some compliments to the beige because it's sacrificing itself in order for some other things to be distinct. And as you're listening to this as a practical guideline, especially on your way to making content memorable, consider this then. What is something that you can sacrifice and assign to beige so that something else can indeed deviate from that pattern?
So, if some beige is necessary, what actually makes something more memorable? What are the elements that push the brain beyond the beige wall?
Yeah, let's get to some practical guidelines. So, we already talked about this notion of distinctive, of disruptive as one of the criteria. But by the time we finish the conversation, we can end up with a miniature checklist. Let's start from the premise that as completing all those studies that you're noticing using those tools, with no exceptions, I'm noticing that people forget after 48 hours, 90% and quite often more of the content that they've been exposed to, regardless of how brilliant that content is, regardless of how balanced it is between beige and some other distinctive
Mm,
things. You're, for now, addressing human brains that have a fallible human memory. We haven't merged with that AI that you're just talking about just yet. So we have human memory that is fallible. And if we know that we forget so much, that's not really even the biggest problem. The biggest problem is that your audiences are going to forget a lot. And the little they remember, let's consider a metaphorical 10%, because sometimes you may go a bit beyond 10, not that often, quite often goes below. So
mhm.
that metaphorical 10% that tends to stay there long term is quite often random. So that means that if you, with your content, you're trying to convince not just one person to remember what you have to say so that then they can act on what you have to say, but you're trying to convince groups of people, you can't afford random memory. Quite often, people won't decide in your favor because not every single person remembers the same thing. So when they come back and reconvene, one person will have taken away a 10% message from your content, another
Mm.
person will have taken another 10%, another person another message. So your aspiration is not just random memory, but unified memory. So as an umbrella message for our
Mm.
conversation, I want to convey this notion of control your 10%, be in charge of that, do not leave it to chance. So now that we have this overall proposition, control your 10%, what goes underneath that? Well, can control what you cannot clarify. So as you're starting
Mm.
to create some content, whether this is in writing, whether this is text and images, always, or a video, always ask the question, what is my 10% message? If you're really after memorable content, and if you're after behavioral change, then you must be, then clarify what you want to be memorable for. A lot of people aspire at memory, but not that many know what they want to be memorable for.
I mean, that's a really strong point. I mean, how do you decide what the 10% should be? If it's often random, how do you choose the part you want people to remember?
It's a strong question, and it's where you'll spend most of your effort, because the question sounds easy in theory,
Mm.
clarify your 10%. In action, you must be prepared to exert some effort. For instance, in our company called Enhansive, we work with a lot of corporate customers. And quite often, those customers come from spaces that are very competitive because they want to use their content in order to beat the beige wall,
Hmm.
because your competition is going to show up with beige, and then you have beige and you have beige, and at some point you have to have a distinctive message. So we help them with that message, not only in phrasing it and framing it, but
Mm.
also then designing some assets that make that stand out. One such context is the space of construction and architecture, because those spaces are highly competitive. So let's just say that you were the owner of a hospital, you want to redo
Mhm.
a wing of that hospital. So now you need a builder and
Yeah.
you need an architect to help you with that project. And there is no shortage of construction and architecture firms. You send out an RFP, a request for proposal. You get, let's just say, 10 responses back. From those 10, you will pick your top three. And those top three firms now show up in front of you with some content, with a formal presentation to convince you to move in their favor versus in other people's
Mm.
favor. So you'd better have a strong 10% message, because that decision is not going to be made right there in the moment. People walk away, and this is groups of people. This is not just one person you have to convince. They will walk away to deliberate, and that deliberation period takes a few weeks, if not sometimes months. So you have
Mm.
to be memorable for that long in order for people to ultimately say, I still remember that bit much better than this other bit. So I'll give you an example of a 10% message that we just created, which would have been very strong in one context, not so strong in another, because you asked a good question. How do you come up with that 10% message? So for this instance, we are helping this company to win the a yes from the company Louis Vuitton. Have you heard of Louis Vuitton? You know that
Yep.
brand.
Yeah.
So Louis
Brilliant.
Vuitton wants to come here to California, and not to any place but Beverly Hills. And in Beverly Hills, not on any street but Rodeo Drive, to
Of
build
course.
not one but two buildings.
Two
One building
buildings.
would be two buildings. One would be for your typical retail, and one would be for exhibition and entertainment space. For
Wow.
that, they've already selected their architect, which is Frank Gehry. But for those listeners who don't know Frank Gehry, go to any search engine, type in the name, and you will see these structures that just defy gravity, because he's doing with steel things that you didn't know steel was possible of doing. And Louis Vuitton, of course, wants to work with some of
Hmm.
the most prominent architects already beyond the beige. So now they need a construction company. So, what was our 10% message for that setup? Because you're now partnering with brands like Louis Vuitton and the Frank Gehry's of the world, the promise that we made is that we will build like the world is watching. That was the main message, because we recognize that we're building on a site that defines elegance, for a
Hmm.
brand that defines exclusivity, with an architect that defies geometry. This will become one of the most watched construction sites on the planet. So when you say build like the world is watching, you're always instilling this confidence that things will go smoothly. Things will go in such a way that as the world is watching, because every single architect, every single fashion designer, every single engineer will want to see how the Frank Gehry design will play such a big role in such a prominent spot. So as we talk about criteria for a strong 10% message, what's behind that? We looked for a message that has cognitive ease. Build
Hmm.
like the world is watching doesn't come to the brain in a heavy kind of way. The words roll off the tongue. It has a very strong reward, because you're protecting the ego in this case.
Hmm. I mean, you've talked before about surprise, that the brain pays attention when something feels slightly new, but not too new. Is surprise an important part of the 10%?
Yeah, let's talk about this notion of surprise for a moment, because it is a strong skill to have, that of developing an element of surprise and controlling it, because you don't want to be all that surprising all the time. And why is that? Because the brain, here we are talking about AI, and it's here to
Mm,
stay, and its predictive power. Everybody talks about that. But the most advanced, at least for now, predictive engine on the planet is still the brain. A brain that doesn't
mm,
predict what happens next with a fair amount of accuracy is not a brain that can survive. So we're constantly sharpening our analysis of the environment. We're constantly looking to see what's likely to happen next, what will happen next. From the brain's perspective, the most important thing is what happens next. So if we look at the element of surprise, biologically speaking, surprise is always bad for the brain. And
I
why is
see.
that? Because what is surprise but a failure to predict what happens next?
Interesting.
I remember an image that showed initially an eggshell, and then the eggshell gets broken, and instead of what you would expect to come out of there, you see this little pug. You know those tiny little cutesy
Yes.
dogs?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So eggshells you've seen before, pugs you've seen before, but that combination you may not necessarily have seen before. So, therefore, an element of surprise. You didn't predict what would happen next.
Mm,
And even though, biologically speaking, we don't necessarily like surprises, we welcome them, because the difference between what happens and what the brain expects is how the brain learns. And the learning brain, very much like we have machine learning, a
mm,
learning brain is definitely one that also survives. So, as you're thinking about surprises, consider them, first of all, in moderation, because think of it this way: too much familiarity and too much beige, and your
mm,
content is boring. Too many surprises and your content is weird and very heavy to the brain. Is like now you're just provoking almost too much tension. So find a good proportion between these two pillars. And when it comes to a 10% message, should it in itself have an element of surprise? Perhaps a slight twist to the familiar, but don't put so much pressure on yourself. I would recommend using elements of surprise right before your 10% message,
Okay.
which is one that has some familiarity, which is one that makes logical sense, is not one that will shake your world so much that you don't want to really go there. But one of the reasons people don't remember and don't act is because they're not prepared to pay attention. They're not in a ready state. So, with an element of surprise, you get the brain in a ready state. And then, as a result, what you say next has a chance to be memorable. I remember this lawyer starting her presentation with something around the minions. You
Yeah.
know, the minions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that contrast between a lawyering like context and the cutiness of the silliness of the minions was so sharp that now we are in a ready state. We did not predict that this lawyer is going to go up there and start with that. So you see, sprinkle these some of these elements of surprise, which will not be very easy to find, by the way. But when you find
Mm.
them, treat them like a treasure and prime the brain right before you share your 10% message.
You said emotion is a gateway to memory. But with AI able to mimic tone and empathy synthetically now, what emotions still feel real to the brain, and what can it actually detect?
I like that question a lot because in just recently in a neuroscience study, I was looking at this concept of active listening. And in that case, you know how I showed you a picture of what a person is
Yeah.
wearing during my neuroscience studies, and in some of them, I have one person at a time who's interacting with a piece of content. More recently, with an AI tool, by the way, or
Okay.
seeing AI generated content, but it's one person at a time. In this active listening, I did something that is very convoluted to do, by the way, in neuroscience, and logistically a nightmare, which is to have pairs wearing the gear. And the reason why you sometimes want to go there and adopt what's called a hyper scanning technique, meaning that you're scanning more than two or more people at a time, is because you're looking to see when the two brains synchronize. And the reason you might want to see some synchronization between the two or more brains is because typically that's associated with better collaboration, better cooperation. Quite often, that's because of shared understanding of the same content,
Mhm.
and that's desirable for a lot of commercial contexts. So, in this active listening study, you had a seller and a buyer wearing the gear. So, I was looking to see when the two brains were synchronized between the two and when some active listening was happening. But active listening in itself is such an esoteric term. I had to ask, like, what really is active listening? Is it just simply paying attention? Is it eye contact? Is it just shared pain? Because if you have a spouse, you know for sure that sometimes you pretend to be listening while you don't really want to be listening. So I had a very hard time defining things. And as a scientist, you really don't want to go into a situation without defining your terms carefully. So I looked for moments where active listening could be a sign of. And as I was investigating other literature, what are some moments where active listening can appear? Like, for instance, empathy. You mentioned empathy
Mm.
just moments ago. Some literature is associating active listening with empathy. What were some other ones? When somebody elaborates on something, that too might invoke some active listening because you're sharing some details. What else could be active listening? Some other scientists were saying that when you affirm somebody else's situation, like you're saying, oh, you're not alone, that means you will have actively listened to what they said, and you're concluding that their situation is not unique. In sales, that often happens when a buyer says, oh, we're struggling with XYZ, and the seller would
Mm.
say, well, you're not alone in this. So affirmation was also one of the aspects of active listening. And the fourth one that I studied was insight. That surprised me because some people are equating the moment that you share an insight with somebody else's brain, they would consider that to be an increase in active listening because now you're a little bit perhaps more curious. So you're leaning in a little bit more. And of the four, so now we have affirmation, you're not alone, we have empathy. I can see how that would have been hurtful for you. You have an insight, giving some amazing statistics and some
Mhm.
trends around something and providing a different way of thinking. And then also you have elaboration. Out of the four, I noticed that the touchy-feely ones actually don't work. So it's not so much about just using automation just because you can, it's fixing your workflows first and
Mhm.
then automating that which works. And when you work with our company, the vendor was saying, we are enabling you to automate just the right workflow so that you can increase your automation efforts and decrease the amount of errors by 90% or whatever their proposition was. So you had a strong insight, and that ignites a reaction. It's like, oh, I didn't recognize that I had the wrong workflows. And of course, elaboration, then you're adding a few more details around that. I suspect that works because, with no exception, I'm noticing in my neuroscience studies that the brain synchronizes better with that which is complex, not that which is simple. Sometimes we give in to these simple emotions like anger or fear or
Mm.
even excitement or joy. You don't always have to go negative, but those are fairly on the surface. If you start digging a little bit more deeply and you elaborate and you offer insight, the emotion will still be there, but it'll be longer lasting.
I mean, that's really interesting. And there's a bit of surprising insight too, isn't there? I mean, when you introduce something unexpected or a perspective people haven't considered before.
Yes, and now we come all the way around to that element of surprise that you're taking the brain out of its predictable state, out of its beige state, and with a solid insight, which will in itself take a lot of work, by the way. Not all just factual information is insightful information. Sometimes
Mm.
facts parade with confidence, and we feel like, oh, then therefore they'll come across as insightful. You have to have at least a combination of stats. You have to
Mm.
have at least one moment of cause and effect. You're saying, because this is happening, because you're automating the wrong things, then you have these workflows that end up in manual errors. So a good insight will always have cause and effect, which, if you're only listing a bunch of facts and there is no cause and effect between those, they don't get you to a better story. That pivot point that you're noticing is the way to a better story.
I mean, taking all of that, what are some practical things brands or individuals could do to make their social content more insightful and more memorable, especially on LinkedIn?
Yeah, if we go just for this notion for a moment of insightful content, which because of its stronger emotional appeal then can turn into memorable content, start looking for trends and challenges is one way. It's not the only way, but one way is to start looking for some trends, some challenges, some observations that you're making in your field or a context that is important to your audience. Look for patterns or connections between those trends and factual information, and challenge yourself to then establish a cause and effect. Through some testing, you may see if that cause and
Mm.
effect is really true, like this thing really causes this other thing to happen. And the moment that you can claim that causality, and causality can be very sexy in memorable content, that's when you're on your way to insightful and a stronger emotional content that you're sharing.
I just want to pick up on that word attention. I mean, people talk a lot about shrinking attention spans. What's actually changing, and what can marketeers do differently to earn attention today?
Well, here's the good news. The good news is that with neuroscience, we can debunk a myth. And that myth is so prevalent that I'm hoping that in light of our conversation right now, people question it all the time. And that myth is that we have a short attention span. Human beings do not have a short attention span. We cannot afford a short attention span if the ultimate goal is survival. We have what we need to pay attention for a prolonged amount of times. You don't even have to work in neuroscience to know this is so. You just have to be honest with yourself when you're wondering, what's the longest amount of hours I have binge watched on a TV show? And notice how, do you have, by the way, a favorite show that you can just watch for hours on end?
I mean, loads of them. I mean, Game of Thrones, for example. You can
Yeah,
watch.
so imagine Games of Thrones is so popular, but globally popular, and I'm glad that you're mentioning it, and people are on it for hours on end. This is not seconds on end, which is why it bothers us when people popularize articles like human beings have the attention span of a goldfish. First of all, I would have loved to be part of that study that looked at the attention span of goldfish, because that would be interesting. But as human beings, we are capable, just know this, we are capable of staying with a stimulus as long as that stimulus is important enough and or interesting enough, ideally a combination. And sometimes, especially with business content, those two criteria are not there. Sometimes things are just simply not that interesting, and sometimes they're not all that important. So
Mm.
therefore, we have other things to watch and go do and look at. So knowing that there is good news, then we ask the question, how do we make something interesting and or important? We've already talked about a few criteria. For example, finding something that is rewarding to the brain. That's a very strong question to ask. What's rewarding to their brain, not to your
Mhm.
brain? Finding something that comes to the brain easily. You don't have to strain yourself in order to be part of that situation. For instance, one other message that we came up with for we're talking about construction. Choose the team with deja vu, because what does a project owner want? They typically want somebody with expertise
Mhm.
and somebody who has been in those types of projects before. So you're not just saying choose the expert team, you're saying choose the team with deja vu. I know you live in France, so for you, that message comes to mind very easily. Uh, so you see how you're just giving the brain just a small amount of a desirable difficulty where you have this very brief aha moment. By the way, with those tools that I showed you, we're able to calculate a eureka effect. So we will be able to see at what point through a sequence does the brain have that aha moment. When you have it, it's
Mm,
more likely that you'll have a stronger electrochemical signal, a stronger emotion. Not all the time, but
Mhm.
most of the time that is associated with long-term memory. So look to see, as you're creating things, you have beige, 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 and then every so often, can you have that little eureka effect of, oh, I didn't really know this, or I haven't really looked at it that way before.
I mean, in the B2B world, when so much marketing is quite dull, color palettes, tone, formats, if we go right to the heart of this, what's the one thing B2B marketeers could do to make their content more memorable and less beige this week?
This week, or even as early as this afternoon. Let's
Yes.
let's let's go for that. Well, here's the good news. The good news is that your content by itself is never beige. It's never boring. There's something that you can do to always rescue it. On the surface, it may be like, could there be really such a sexy thing in governance processes, for instance, and
Mhm.
data analysis in general? You can rescue any beige, you can rescue any content. So for example, we are working with a company in the space of governance processes.
Mhm.
There was this software tool that you can use especially for board members or executive teams in order for to be kept in check, because sometimes leaders of a company will go out there. You're talking about LinkedIn messages or some
Mhm.
popular social media platforms, and they will post something or they will say something publicly, and that content will now spread, and they get themselves and their companies in so much trouble. So there has to be some governance that just keeps
Yeah.
these processes in check and these luminaries in check. So how do you rescue a governance presentation, for instance? Well, go for practical examples that people can relate to, and those elements you'll be able to see in your environment later on. So for example, we are giving some stories about the CEO of Lululemon. You're familiar with that brand,
Mhm.
who said a
Mhm.
few things and got himself in trouble. The CEO of Boeing said a few things, got himself in trouble.
Mm,
The CEO of
okay.
United Airlines said a few things, got himself in trouble. So you're bringing in all of those very concrete, very specific examples. You're also mentioning some brands that later on act as cues to memory, because the next time you're going to walk by a Lululemon store, you'll be reminded, oh, so that's I can remember that story that I heard. Or next time you're
Mm.
on an airplane, Boeing is so prevalent, you'll be reminded of that story and that concept. So a few practical guidelines from here, you can apply these as early as the show is over. look to see how many concrete things are you really associating with your beige content, and can they be part of something that people see in their reality when you're no longer in the room. Because memory doesn't just happen out of the blue. Like, you're not sitting at your desk thinking, I'm going to now recollect everything that I read from that content. Usually something happens in your reality and it reminds you of something, which then reminds you of something else. So associate your content with something that is prevalent as a cue, and then your memory is going to live that much longer.
Could you give an example of how that might work?
Yeah, so when we were saying that in your governance processes, we are associating that with United Airlines, with Boeing, with Lululemon, because those segments are so prevalent in your own reality. When you move away from your computer, you're likely to see those segments. That's how you're looking for cues that are prevalent in people's environments. And they don't even have to be as big as, for instance, brand names. I remember we were doing a presentation once, we were noticing that the company that was creating the presentation was after some behavior change, and they were always having in this little kitchen area a bunch of oranges. Like, anytime we showed up at the office, those oranges were present there. So in the presentation itself, we built it around this orange motif and an actual physical orange. And we also applied the slight sense of humor. Like, for instance, there was this orange that was peeling itself, and the more that it was taking layers, it was reflecting on something that was quite philosophical.
Okay.
But that orange, then anytime, and that presentation was over, but then anytime you walked by those bowl of oranges, you always kept that in mind. It's like, oh, that reminds me of that little orange that was peeling itself. So look to see what in your audience's environments could remind them of you and your content and your message.
And this links right back to what you said earlier, the 10%, the thing they're most likely to remember, yeah?
Yes, ideally you associate then your 10% message with that.
Carmen, thank you very much. That was a fascinating look under the hood. You've given us a scientific backing for something many of us feel intuitively, that emotion and story aren't nice to haves, that how the brain decides what's worth keeping. That's a powerful argument against beige. Jumping into the LinkedIn chat for a second, what's one change you could make to your next post, email, or deck to give it the best chance of being remembered? It could be more story, more contrast, more emotion, whatever Carmen sparked for you. Next, we move from memory to influence and what it means to build trust and visibility now that AI can post for you. Influence used to be about showing up, sharing consistently, and building trust over time. But now we have AI tools that can show up for us, they can post, schedule, and even mimic our tone. What does real influence look like in that world? Andy Lambert from Adobe, the founder of Content Cal, has spent years helping leaders and brands grow their visibility on social, and he's been right at the center of how AI is reshaping that process. So, in our conversation today, Andy explores why consistency still matters, but credibility matters even more. So, we talk about how to blend automation with genuine presence and how to use AI to scale your ideas rather than impersonate you. Andy, great to have you here. AI can already plan, write, and post at scale. So why do people still follow people? I mean, what makes the human voice still valuable?
You mentioned the word trust. That kicked off the segment of this conversation. And trust could be described in a formula, which is reliability, how frequently you show up, plus relatability, as in, how much as an individual do you like that person, plus usefulness. So is that person generally helpful? And take that equation and then divide it by time. So basically, is this someone that is helpful? Is it someone that is someone that you really like? And also, is this someone that you generally find value in their content? And do they do this with consistency, right? So do they show up time and time again? So AI can do most things better than humans, but what it can't do is tell stories that have deep meanings. And the relatability piece is such a key component in how we build trust at scale, because, of course, being useful, turning up consistently, all that stuff is known to everyone. But turning up with a narrative that is deeply and intrinsically yours is the critical piece here. And it's important not to see ourselves versus AI either here, right? AI is absolutely an enabler for all of this, as we'll get into. But it's the stories that make us deeply human, and the narratives that we have and the experiences that we've had and our perspectives, because everyone has their own little narrow slice of the world that they see. And it's our job to unleash our narrow slice of the world onto others to share our perspectives and viewpoints, which ultimately, builds trust at scale.
Do you think AI marks the death of broadcast style social? Or could it actually be the moment social media gets reinvented?
Well, broadcast should never have been the way that we approach social anyway. So social is social for a reason. Obviously, you know this as well as anyone, Andrew. But what we're seeing is like just the death of the follower and the death of the general feed, right? And that's been a trend that has existed for a while, and that's been accelerated by TikTok, then Reels, and now with all of this kind of AI first content that is still in its infancy, but it's just going to explode, right? Just look to what's top of the app stores. Well, at least it was last week, which is OpenAI Sora, which is just really AI content consumption. Humans are funny creatures, but ultimately this trend of social is inherently becoming less social, like this broadcast to a feed, follow people, etc. That has had its day, I actually think. And you can see this in the decline of time spent on social. Now, I'm a person that absolutely adores social media, as you have, but times are changing, and that's for sure. And this future of social is more about depth and breadth, where we follow fewer people but go deeper with them and follow them on different spaces. Those spaces might be LinkedIn, but they also might be Substack. They might be a podcast, and a podcast doesn't need to have like 1 million downloads. It just needs to have a real clear narrative that is targeted around what you stand for and who you seek to serve. The day of like social media becoming like, oh, the sign of success is going viral, I just don't buy it. But then again, this is just my kind of like narrow slice of the world. I care about B2B. I care about smaller communities. I care about business growth. I've never got into social for fame. So, and unfortunately, we've kind of classified success in the wrong way. And unfortunately, in thinking like this, we've always thought about, our mindset has been in the wrong place, which has been we overfixate on the stuff that we say and underfixate on what other people say about us and the kind of the communities and the word of mouth that we build.
So what does this shift look like day to day when AI is in the mix? What actually separates a genuine thought leader, for want of a better phrase, from the AI assisted noise that's now everywhere?
Well, yeah, AI is kind of, it has, lowered the floor basically, because actually you've raised the floor but lowered the ceiling. So it's now given everyone an opportunity to create, which is great. And I love this. Still more people expressing themselves, amazing. But it now writes better than us, it can scale better than us, yada yada. But it tends to be quite surface level. Now, again, I don't believe in a narrative of like, this or that. It's always a bit of both. Is AI good or is it bad, etc.? It's always a bit of both. And some people do wonderful things with no AI assistance. But, for me personally, AI is a core part of everything I write on LinkedIn. It's my thought partner. It's the way I kind of stretch my thinking and address any biases, any bits where I'm blind to at the moment. Because like, why would you not? And I think that's an important point, is like, I think over time, especially if you're a thought leader and you're demonstrating your expertise, if you're an expert in something, when you're expert, you know your blind spots, you know the things that you're like, am I using confirmation bias on this? You know, this is what people that are non-expert do. They're like, this is how it is, it's that or that. The more you understand a subject, the more you understand what you don't know. And that, I think that is a really important point that really separates the LinkedIn influencers, which is like, SEO's dead, this is the way we do it. No, it's not, you fool. It's like, but when people don't understand critical thinking, you know, then you end up just going into that whole kind of, it just feels AI-y. But AI is so important for us to like get deeper thinking and create deeper outcomes as a result. I mean, other people might be a better critical thinker than me and not need to use AI, but I find it incredibly helpful in addressing any unconscious bias and that kind of stuff. And that, as a result, helps create like content with meaning. Now, does that mean that I could create a post that I would write myself? Would a post I wrote myself do better than a post that just got generated with AI? I'm not entirely convinced whether that would be the case. And when I say doing better, I mean, you know, the surface level vanity metrics. Would it get more likes or whatever? I'm pretty convinced AI could write a post. If your objective is just to go viral and just do LinkedIn fame, AI is fine. Crack on with it, because it can write better hooks, it's trained on better data, etc. Ask it to study the top 10 best performing posts of that week on LinkedIn and create your hook and a topic very similar to that. Cool, done, easy. You gamed it, congrats. But what happens off the back of it? Probably very little, because what do you stand for? What's your purpose? And how importantly does all of this narrative turn into business? And that is a key thing about thought leadership.
At a surface level, we can all spot these AI-ish patterns, the M dashes, the polished phrasing, the tone. I mean, have you ever used AI and thought, this looks too polished, too artificial? I mean, what do you think causes that feeling?
You know, there's patterns that people can spot, like the ones that you mentioned, but another very common writing pattern is like AI writes compelling sentences, but they're also quite I'm going to call them like empty calories, because they sound good, but they don't really do anything, right? So it's like the narrative of like, it's not this, it's that. It's always that as a pattern. Sometimes they're great, and sometimes it's kind of relevant to leave in. But it's, again, we can't shortcut expertise and a point of view on a subject matter, and you know, that strong point of view is where it starts. That is rooted in, you know, your perspectives and understanding. So that's the core. And typically my AI workflow has always been I speak my thoughts, because I'm a verbal thinker. Like whenever I'm trying to deal with a problem, I look like I look a bit weird because I pace around my house, speak out loud. It's just the only way I figured out I can process my thoughts. But now I just speak it into ChatGPT. So it's all of that nuance, of which now, you know, the time it takes me to create stuff has definitely collapsed, because it means that taking my big narrative that I just waffled into ChatGPT, just using basically as a voice note, it's then made it into something that actually is salient. I'm like, give me all of the key points from what I've just spoken about, clean up what I've just said. I will then read it, refine it, then ask it to go into a LinkedIn post, then refine it again. And it's just all about a case of like, I just don't think you can one shot this. You can't be like, create me a post about the future of SEO for LinkedIn. It's going to turn you out something that's a bit crud, quite frankly. But if you have either some great narratives and a great point of view on this, you're like, I want to create a post on the future of SEO. Here are my thoughts, insert voice note. Here's some supporting data. Turn this into something that has like 3 key takeaways based on like X, Y, Z. Then your output looks much better. Then, of course, you're going to do your final editing nuance, which for me, ChatGPT is far too, like the outputs are too, I was going to say, I'm trying to find a better word, but I'm going to say authoritarian. It's like, this is the way, where my narrative is much more self-effacing than that, which is like, here's the thing that I've seen in my view. What do you think is the type of thing? And I just kind of soften it. You know, I round the edges on it, and then it's ready to go. But again, it's hugely personal. But yeah, that's the way I kind of manage both using ChatGPT as like an efficiency enhancer, but not replacing, one, my core expertise, or two, my tone of voice.
You've often said, Andy, that consistency matters more than frequency. Does that still hold when AI can churn out posts daily?
Yeah, I mean, I think the delightful thing is that, again, that whole kind of, is it black or is it white type of narrative, we've always had this debate in social, quality over quantity, etc. Like, which one's better? The fact is, it's sadly, it's both. Really, it's like the more you do, the higher your results are going to be. AI does allow us to unlock a lot more narrative from our mind. Our expertise has been or can be more unlocked than it ever has been before, right? Because in the same, I gave an example of my workflow, not saying that's the right way of doing it, but irrespective. But again, like, going back to that consistency point, which goes right back to the start of the conversation, all starts with you having a very deep conversation with yourself of, what do you want to be known for? There is an overlapping Venn that exists between the expertise that you have and who you seek to serve and the problems that they face. There's an overlapping Venn, which is your kind of, this was in a book called Good to Great, which is one of my favorite business books, called The Hedgehog Concept, which is like, what is the thing that is undeniably yours? So once you've understood your hedgehog concept, I think it's borrowed from the Japanese philosophy of ikigai, basically, right? So once you understand that, that is everything, because it grounds you in like your purpose, your mission, your values, and all that kind of stuff, which is irreplaceable. And then you can kind of cut away a lot of that noise of like, should I use AI or shouldn't I? It doesn't matter, because if you're staying true to your purpose and what you seek to serve and what you stand for, and what you represent, if you're staying true for that, doesn't matter whether you use AI or don't, as long as you're staying true to that core, center of that Venn. And then that also then translates into that whole kind of consistency versus frequency, because consistency is going to be nailed because you've got that center of that Venn locked and loaded. This is what I stand for. And frequency will drive better results. Show up more often, better results. So we don't really have that challenge that we had before, which is, it takes a ton of time to write a good quality post from scratch. Sometimes I just get so frustrated that I'm like now 90 minutes into trying to pen 500 words, and I'm like, what? And it just gets frustrating by that point, because you just haven't, you're like, I've got something in my mind, I can't unlock it. And now we can actually properly unlock this stuff. What I'm saying is nothing new to anyone, but it just means that we just don't have to have that debate of like, do we have to turn over our lives into, being LinkedIn content creators? No, the fact is, like, if you've got strong points of views and narratives, you can get like a good quality post done in 20 minutes a day and post every day if you wanted to.
It is part of the challenge that people haven't done the deeper identity work. I mean, understanding who they are and what they actually stand for.
For sure. That's like the hardest part, and very few people do the hard yards that it takes to do that, because it requires just some deeper thought around it, and it requires us not to be like, oh, I've got to get a post out today on something. It requires us to take a step back from it and go, look, I'm gonna go dark for a week. I'm not gonna post anything on LinkedIn, and that's okay. The world ain't gonna stop. Everything will be fine. But I'm just gonna take this week just to truly hone in. Let me reflect on, what I've heard from my industry, where I'm expert. And to be honest with you, I often, for these critical things where I'm just really struggling with something, like, there is nothing better than AI to get you thinking here, because you're like, all right, here's what I would do when I'm kind of creatively blocked. I'm like, here's a bunch of data and data points. Here's like all of the transcripts from like customer feedback calls over the last year. Tell me what people are struggling with the most in my space. Cool, we got that. Now I'm going to start a conversation with it to be like, well, here are my like top performing posts. What do you think is like the common thread between them? Okay, cool. So now we've got like common challenges from our audience and common threads of like the things that have resonated most deeply. I'll then feed in some of the comments from like the top performing posts. What are the kind of things that we're hearing from non-customers, the challenges, the things that work, either the challenges they're surfacing or the things that worked well from the post that I shared. And then we're starting to figure this out. And then I would ask like ChatGPT or whatever. I defer to that one, but it doesn't matter, whatever your model of choice is. Like if you had to create an overlap between like my expertise, look at my LinkedIn profile, look at all the things, here's some podcasts I've done or whatever, anything you've done publicly. Here's the things that I've done. Here's the things that I enjoy that give me energy. You now know the stuff that my customers in the industry are struggling with. Where do we think the overlapping then is? It might give you like a whole bunch of ideas, and I'll be like, well, expand on that. Tell me why. Give me some citations. You know, you end up with it's going to take you a couple of hours for sure, but what you're doing, you're basically working with a therapist to like go and getting inside your mind. It just requires you to have like that open-mindedness to see new information and pivot based on that new information. And sometimes that's quite uncomfortable because oftentimes it's just an inherently human trait where we look for confirmation bias for the things that we have believed before. But what we're actually looking for is like, okay, I appreciate I might actually have an uncomfortable conversation with my AI here where I'm going to be told some things that I've thought that have worked, but aren't working. And I'm actually having this very same conversation for me personally. I've been doing this social media roundup for 7 years, every week on LinkedIn. And I'm now at the point of like, it's a sunk cost fallacy. I don't think it's actually delivering the results for the things that I actually want to be in this next chapter of my life. And I now feel a weight of responsibility of like, I've been doing it for so long. Should I just do it? Like, and that's actually a very difficult conversation to have, of which, you know, just so you know, like no one's got this figured out. We all go through those journeys of like, you know, at certain points, we're going to need to reevaluate. And man, that was a very long response to your question. But I think it's a really important thing of how we understand what we seek to stand for. But that also will change over time based on your own career trajectory or objectives, whatever it might be. And, you know, I feel exactly the same.
I mean, when people talk about AI skills, do you think these deeper thinking skills matter more than simply, I don't know, learning the latest model or tool?
I mean, like AI is pretty useless unless you give it context. So, and that is the kind of key message for all of this. And it's funnily enough, it's quite timely because I was just looking at some data from Statista about marketers' use of AI, and you know, looked at the kind of volume of that in 2025, what they're using it for, and it's all for like creating copy from scratch or doing edits. I didn't see one single point about like data analysis, like insight creation, strategic guidance, the things that it's actually really good at. Like nothing beats AI for chomping through buckets of data and then going, here's the most salient points. Because as a human, we do not have the mental capacity to process all of that information and distill it into something from all these disparate sources. But we're not using it. And I think this is probably like, it's a very, I don't know, I'm thinking twice about saying this, but it reflects like a challenge that we have in our society is that we're so used to us just taking an action and delivering on them. It is unfortunately, it's redolent of the industrial age where in schooling, etc., we're told to say, all right, just give me an answer, give me a question and I'll go and answer it. But in fact, what very few people are actually skilled enough about doing is asking very good questions. and critical thinking. No one really learnt that unless you did
Mm.
debating at university. You probably haven't really thought much about this, like especially like Socratic questioning, which is like, what if I believe the opposite? Like, what are the things that would need to be true in order for me to believe this? You know, all of those things that allow you to get deeper into it. And using AIs, and the final thing I'm going to say here, forces us to think more like a manager, think more of like, because a successful manager is all about how can you ask the best quality questions of those people to help yield the best quality responses. And yeah, few of us are good enough. And from what I've observed, this is a very broad statement. So, you know, it's just an opinion. This is just an opinion. But our skill is basically in asking high quality questions. That's it.
Before we close, what excites you the most about this shift? I mean, what does it mean for personal brand building, employee advocacy, and the chance for people to express their expertise more clearly than ever?
I appreciate throughout this course of conversation, I probably made this sound more complex than it needs to be. But you know, what I'm excited about, and this is kind of making sure we have like a real positive note here, is that what I'm excited about here is like we've never had it so good in terms of helping us express ourselves online and helping us display our unique expertise. And especially given what's happening with the rest of social that we spoke about earlier, the kind of more kind of micro community following like those deep personal human narratives. Social media is going back to how it should be, which is like, yeah, those more deeper human narratives. And I think that means wonderful things for like employee advocacy use cases, personal brand building. And I've never been more encouraged about how important this channel is in growing our businesses. And the final thing I'll say is like, don't feel guilty about it. I've seen enough people go like, oh yeah, kind of like AI is their dirty secret for like creating content. No, it's like, no, it's genuinely very, very good. And at some point it's going to become like kind of irresponsible not to use it because you have the world's corpus of information to help inform your thinking on stuff. So to just be informed by our narrow slice of the world we see is actually irresponsible. So, you know, think about it in those two lenses. Don't get enamored with the ease, but also don't feel guilt about using it because it is the world's best tool. You know, we've never had anything so incredibly valuable should we use it in the right way, like we've just been talking.
Andy, thank you. That was a very grounded, practical take. You're reminded that visibility isn't vanity, it's part of the job, and that AI should sit behind our thinking, not in front of it. I think will land perfectly for this audience. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you. Head into the LinkedIn chat now and share. I mean, what's one change you want to make in how you use AI for your own visibility or leadership content? Next, we zoom out from individuals to teams and look at how employees and advocates can use AI without all sounding the same. Employee advocacy has been through a big shift. Traditional programs often plateau because employees don't know what to say or worry about sounding generic or too on script. At the same time, AI now gives everyone access to writing support, which could either make advocacy really beige or it could unlock it. Our next session is a panel with two people who live this reality every day. Eva Balachova from Danfoss and Nathan Benekins from Capgemini. Together, Eva and Nathan explore what's really stopping employees from posting. They get into how AI can support people without flattening their voice, and what a more modern human approach to advocacy looks like inside real organizations. Eva, Nathan, it's fantastic to have you both with us today. To begin, what do you think about collaboration between humans and AI inside your programs? What does it actually look like on a day-to-day basis?
Awesome. Thank you for having me for this conversation. Um, It's a very hard question. And honestly, when I'm thinking about machines and humans working together, I see machines or AI working as our assistants and our brainstorming buddies, not really a replacement. And so far, what I see in the employee advocacy world today, it really helps people to, structure the ideas, build confidence, move faster. So I don't see yet replacing it.
Thank you so much for having me here in the call. Yeah, when you talk about machine collaboration, of course, obviously, you also talk about AI. And what we see right now is actually that there's a lot of caution about working with AI at this moment. So we don't want AI to or an AI input to harm our people and our organization. For example, saying things that are not correct or authentic, right? So we're not embracing it like fully yet. We are a little bit cautious, right? So and I think we're mostly working now with AI on efficiency, to do things faster. Now maybe meaning like quantity above quality at this point. But I think eventually people will evolve in the future, right? So that collaboration between machine and our people and our organization working together, I think we are learning now, right, from the possibilities with working with machines, with AI, between people. So and eventually I think one thing is very important is that too much AI will lose trust, especially in advocacy, right? So we need to keep that human touch. And I think AI, and eventually, and the collaboration with our colleagues, eventually will end up, and also within marketing as a whole, into personalization, right? So I think that's where that collaboration will be eventually, that personalization, because AI can help with that a lot.
So we empowering ambassadors to use AI chat at the beginning because we have AI chat within our Microsoft environment, so we could protect the security of the data that they might share in it, and of course they're getting a training on how to distinguish between sensitive data and not. And we teach our ambassadors when they are prompting it, like how they should use it in order to write from their personal perspective. So how they can protect that human judgment or that personalization or hyper personalization that Nathan is talking about. What we see with our ambassadors is that the blank page is the hardest part for them. That we have many like enthusiastic ambassadors that they want to post, but they are just not confident about posting. They are not aware what kind of stories they can talk about, and they think they have no writing skills. This is like our maybe most problems we can see that's stopping ambassadors to post. So we, for example, offering AI prompt library for our ambassadors, or every week when we are giving them some ideas, like what kind of personal story they can post about, we always give them an example of the prompt they can run in an AI chatbot. So they get kind of trained on prompting it with the context, what kind of roles they can give it.
You both touched on prompts and guidance, which is really interesting. Now, AI can make content look perfect, maybe too perfect. Nathan, I mean, how are you helping employees keep their voice real when these tools can polish everything to the point where it no longer sounds like them?
The first thing what we do is, we have an advocacy program where we encourage our colleagues to, publish content related to Capgemini. But what we see more and more is the collaboration and actually the adoption of advocacy within our marketing initiatives and our sales initiatives. So I think the way how we do that, let's say from a more Capgemini and employee advocacy perspective, is that we really are more like integrating in the process of integrating advocacy into our marketing initiatives, and that means that our marketers go to our experts, to ask them like, hey, you need to be part of this campaign, so you're participating, so you're basically become the face of this campaign, and vice versa.
Definitely similar approach, but I feel when I'm listening to Nathan, we are a bit more looser on it. Like we treat our employee advocacy not as a marketing channel, but we actually treat it as a culture building program and our professional development program. So we have a bit a different goal. Our goal is to build their personal brands, because we know that indirectly our brand will rise with that. So we push a bit more for personal storytelling rather than for a social selling or marketing updates. We have them also. We also use tool where we just giving a lot of content to our ambassadors, and there they can choose what they want to post. So if they are in the mood to post company posts, updates, news, product, they can. If they want to post social selling type of content, again they can. And then we have this culture human content that they can choose from. I mean, looking at that, we see that most of the time they're choosing actually the third, the culture and people content that we using. And we see the difference is that why they're choosing it is a type of copy that we're providing them. So we learned that if we write content in from a personal perspective, copywriting, they are more likely to post it, even if it's, for example, a company update. Like if we do company update and we talk about we do this, we do that, we are amazing. They are more reluctant to post on their social profiles. So what we then do, and here we again recommending them to use AI. We have literally prompts where we tell them, copy paste this what we give you, use this prompt, and it will turn it into your personal language, while still maintaining our brand tone of the voice. And then we're giving them other prompt is where you completely want to go on your own, like here is how you can prompt it on your own personality while still talking about Danfoss. So we are giving them options to show the authenticity. So I think a little more different than Nathan has, but pretty much I agree with everything what he says.
Confidence is such a big part of employee advocacy. I mean, people might have the tools, but they still need to feel brave enough to post. I mean, especially when it's more personal. Do you think AI is empowering people to share more, or is it making them overthink what's good enough?
I cannot really compare it completely. Like my subjective feeling is it's definitely helping them to post more.
Yeah, it's with AI, you don't. Okay, with AI, of course, things become very easy for our people to publish, right? So within our advocacy program, and also, of course, it's all about personal brand, right? That's where advocacy comes in, right? That's also why we choose people that are naturally, active on LinkedIn or other social media already. They are social savvy, basically. They know how it works, and that's also how we select our advocates, basically, right? So, of course, everything needs to be authentic. Everything, that's basically, the base ground, of advocacy, right? To do it from a personal level. And but of course, we also see, our colleagues struggling with time, thinking about what content should they share. Of course, we're helping them, related to our corporate content and our campaigns, like I just said before. But with AI, it's so much faster, easier to quickly create content and ideas. You only have to put an idea. You use ChatGPT, you use Copilot, and you put in a nice prompt and ask, like, hey, can you make a post around this topic that with these keywords and with these thoughts, these point of views, and then create for me a post that helps me. It is so much faster, and I think that's really is the key of AI at this point. It's efficiency, it's creativity, and it really can motivate our colleagues and motivates our colleagues to be more active with their content production, for example.
So it's bringing them together, isn't it? It sounds like both of you saying it's about creating authentic culture and giving people storytelling support, but using AI for efficiency and confidence so they can experiment. So let's finish by zooming out a bit. When you think about the next phase, Advocacy 2.0, what does that look like to you? How do you see AI changing your programs over the next year or two?
So it's maybe not next year, but for me, AI will mean bringing your authentic digital twin basically alive, right? So I'm not sure if this was really the thing, because I really, really, I hope that we will not go into an era where AI is talking to AI only, and the human touch will go away fully. But I think we will get our coworker next to us, basically our digital twin. So where on LinkedIn your profile already is a reflection of us, right? But AI can bring that to life, act at its own, and connect with people, spot opportunities, answer questions, and respond on post autonomous, maybe even post on behalf of us, of course, with validation of us as well. But I think, even, and this is just a thought, but maybe even eventually, maybe LinkedIn will even go away or get a different shape or something like that, because, eventually maybe we are going to feed and sell and buy via chatbots, right?
I mean, it feels a little bit scary right now. I mean, how do you see it, Eva?
I think that having a personal brand will be a big thing, and eventually it will be massive for everybody. So we will see a huge competition on LinkedIn or on social media, fighting for attention, right, of the viewers. So here the AI will come a lot in a place, in a way that we might see in the coming years, that everything will become monogamous, because people just right now learning how to prompt it better, how to be creative with that. So maybe this year and next year and a year after, we're gonna see maybe a downfall of LinkedIn and AI and personal branding. But eventually, the smartest creator is gonna pick up the pace. They're gonna start showing other people how to do it right. And we already see, like, LinkedIn algorithm, for example, changed last quarter, and it's already pushing for quality. Where in the past, advocacy was all about consistency, just post regularly, reshare company content, and you building visibility. But how also I remember that was my first 10,000 followers. Just this. It was not, maybe not even that much quality content, as it was just me every day, just go out. And it was working. So that's gonna completely change the game. How AI will help us, because eventually people would need to reinvent the way how they are working with that. And here I agree also with Nathan. Probably there will be some people who will have literally AI buddy, AI coworker, AI agent literally on them like a twin. But there will be also many people who will be just AI assisted. And there will be always that difference. And also, let's not forget that even today, communication skills of people are different. If you are not gonna be top creator, AI definitely will assist, or will be like 100% assistant or coworker of people, and quality content will be more pushed, because what we also see with AI, the human touch will be like almost required for humans, right? We will be requiring more authentic content. uh, so so it will actually give a lot of opportunity for true storytelling, and those who actually know how to do that they will be rocking the employee advocacy field.
As you say, perhaps the people who start now, building their personal brands and sharing lived experience, might be the ones who succeed in the future.
If I can just respond on that, because I totally
Yeah.
agree here, because yes, we are now looking into efficiency a lot, but having that digital twin, or whatever development eventually will be there, also means that you eventually will have more time to be creative, to be real, to be that, to add that human touch, right? Because I always compare it with 3D illustration, right? If you want to have a perfect shape, like I want to have a 3D circle where you can walk around, it's that you can generate that with a computer, right? But it's like it feels really artificial, right? Just a ball, right? But it's there where we break up that ball, that circle, right? Where we put on structures, lighting, shadows, all those things, where it feels more real. Because just AI, that will definitely not work.
But it is interesting to see how LinkedIn will change as this evolves, especially with so many people talking about AI written content. I mean, do you feel people can keep up with LinkedIn's shift towards quality content? I'm interested to see how.
Can I say something on this topic, which one you brought? I, you know, it always already was there, because if you remember in employer branding, there was always this like a push for like, make your employer branding unique. Why everybody's using same taglines, like have an impact, unleash the talent, whatever, right? Every corporation employer brands have been just copy paste of each other. And all the time for many years, that one message is be unique, be specific. So that's already happening right now. And if you see at the job description or job advertisement, career websites, be honest, most of them are just similar already. So they're going to be similar with AI, but they are already similar today. So always that push for uniqueness will always be there. It's just now we blaming the AI for it. But before also the humans have been copy pasting ideas or the way of expressing the brand or cultures. So for me here, it's nothing really is gonna change. And also, if you really know some copywriting techniques, you can always make that 100% template make feels like it's not templated. There are already today those techniques in the books, copywriting books and NLPs, and we still stay human that are very like I don't know if you heard about the concept ethos, pathos, logos, and it's basically we humans. If you trigger the reptilian limbic system, we don't see anymore like the AI machine. If we just get emotional with the first few sentences, we already buy in on the post. So many people will not see AI content because some people will get very smart how they are triggering those emotions, whether with amazing visuals that are created. It's gonna be entertaining. So I don't think everybody gonna see, oh, that's AI wrote that. I don't think so. We are that smart as we are emotional being.
Yeah, and also Eva, because I agree, because what you see now is that people are experimenting with AI, right? So they try Sora, for example, to create interesting videos. You see a lot of experimentations there, and of course those stand out right now, right? So those things that you were not able to do before, you showcase something that you are, on a parachute, doing your work on a laptop, showcasing a video like that. It looks amazing. It stands out. But is that really your personal brand, or is that just an AI experiment? So I totally agree that, your personal brand, that consistency eventually, that's where the real value comes in, and that's how people will recognize you, right? So IA is now an experiment, I think, and eventually we will adapt it and make it more our own and give it our own point of view, our own touch, our own uniqueness.
And perhaps even what is engaging and entertaining, what is it today, that might shift also. Like, because we are pushing the borders of the digital experience, right? This 3Ds videos and stuff. Maybe in the future also that would be attractive things to do. So then eventually more of us will be pushed to be more maybe digital artificial looking. And I mean, utopia, who knows, maybe we will go to complete digital like anime figure world, like. So we don't know yet how all that the digital experience will shift, because people will start learning to see entertainment in different things. So human will stay, but also the digital experience will evolve.
I mean, it's changing rapidly all the time, isn't it? That's a great look into the future. So before we close, if someone watching wants to make their company a little less beige, a little less like everyone else, what's one practical thing they could do as a leader or as an employee to stand out more?
So one of the things is that people still think that they have to publish that perfect post, and it's not about showing the end result, right? So one of the tips that we always give ourselves is, besides all the support, all the coaching, all the trainings that we give, etc., etc., it's also stay with your personal journey, right? And don't aim for the perfect post showing the end result. Take people on your journey where you eventually go to that end result, right? So it's a little bit more like document and don't just create, right? So document the things that you're doing, learn from it, and take other people on the journey where you learn those things and your experiences, and publish about that. Make it easy, so we do that every day. So even this conversation, for example, I could have published a post before, like, "Hey, I'm having an interview now in a few minutes, right? It's about these and these topics. What would be interesting? What is something that you would like to know, right? I could ask my network. That's something how you could look at it. Like, make it very simple and stay with your own journey and take others on the journey on board."
Oh, Nathan, I love what you said. I wanted to say, but you already said that, but I'm gonna repeat it because that it gives importance. If you, as a company, if you wanna stand out, just be transparent for a change. Since this seems to be hard things for companies, like share not only a good things, that end goals and those achievements, but what Nathan said, just bring them on the journey. I always say share good, bad, ugly. Share what's not working and what are you working on. Even if it's a culture transformation journey, we know that's a tough path for companies, but share how tough is it and what's your like vision for it and where you trying to get with all those beautiful employees. What is the destination? And just be human and vulnerable, not like emotionally, but just be open and transparent in sharing the stories. So I think that already would make you stand out, because that's, maybe I can count companies on these two hands that maybe are really transparent. So just doing that, you're already winning. And then let people share their stories on their own terms. That also will make you stand out, because people's stories are just the biggest buy-in you might get, and they will always be unique because there are never two same stories of two human beings. So just let people share. Don't be control freak.
Eva, Nathan, thank you both so much. You've painted a really honest picture of reality inside organizations and shown that advocacy is as much about confidence, culture, and support as it is about tools. And that's exactly the nuance this discussion needs.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
In the LinkedIn chat, I'd love you to answer this. If you're part of an advocacy program, or perhaps you're thinking about starting one, what would help you or your people feel more confident about posting? Next up, we're going to hear from two founders who've lived this from a different angle, using their own voices to grow their businesses. For founders, visibility isn't a nice side project. It's part of how you win work, build trust, and set the tone for everything your company does. Our next session is all about that founder lens. Dave Stubberfield is the founder of Carter Consultancy, and Sarah Bone is co-founder and CMO of Yo Messaging. And they've used LinkedIn as a key channel to share honestly about the reality of building and growing their businesses. In this conversation, we look at what cutting through the AI noise really means for founders. telling the truth rather than the highlight reel, using lived experiences to build connection, and bringing AI into the creative process without losing the human edge. Dave, Sarah, fantastic to have you here today. Thank you for coming. So let's dive straight in. When did you first realize showing up on LinkedIn wasn't just a nice to have, but actually an essential part of your marketing strategy?
When we first launched Yo, we actually were a consumer product. And so LinkedIn was kind of light touch. And when we pivoted to B2B, we obviously realized that we needed to start utilizing it more. And it wasn't until we launched a crowdfund that we realized that when we were posting from our personal accounts, as well as the company account, we were getting a lot more eyes and more traction and engagement on the personal posts. So it kind of made us rethink things and think, hang on a minute, there's something in this. We need to really make this part of our marketing strategy. And it was around that time that we really started to use it more in that sense.
A little bit on LinkedIn. And I was talking my own language that I understood. And a friend of mine turned around and said, "It's great, Dave, what you're doing, but what do you actually do?" And I was like, right, okay. I need to think about this strategically and not just post stuff out. It's not just about being visible. It's being very precise in what you're trying to say. So it didn't take long to realize that I need to do this. It's all well and good putting content out there, but it needs to be content that people are actually going to engage with. So, and that's probably when I pivoted more towards LinkedIn as well.
Sarah, your product sits in privacy, AI, and security. And these are complex areas that rely on trust. When did you start seeing that your own visibility could help people understand and trust what you're building?
So, I mean, cybersecurity, obviously being an industry, it requires trust. It's like it's the backbone of what we're doing. So I always found that people believe and trust more in people rather than a company. So yeah, I think it's if we can, as people, share our stories and our why and our reason to why we're using it and what was kind of the original idea as to why we started it, it makes people understand it more and therefore build more trust in the person rather than in the company itself. Obviously, you can get reviews or you can get people talking about it as well. But I think if you are, as a founder, the person that is talking about it the most, that's where you're really going to start seeing more trust.
Dave, I mean, you've been posting long before you launched your own business. Did that visibility help when you finally made the leap?
Massively. And I think it kind of, to Sarah's point there, it's the people piece. People see me posting and the things I do and how I help teams, companies, individuals, departments. I think that gives credibility and authority that people go, "Oh, Dave knows what he's talking about." And I think I might be the face of Carter Consultancy, but at least Carter Consultancy isn't a faceless company. So I think being front and center of that has really enabled me to hit the ground running with the business.
So it's really about people being the face of the business. B2B marketing can feel like a sea of sameness, polished, predictable, safe. I mean, how difficult is it for founders to genuinely stand out today?
I think it's really interesting. I've just rekindled Stubby's top tips that I do on a Tuesday. And that is just me talking. And I used to sit there in my bedroom. I'd used to get the ring light and I would get that sort of in the right position and I'd make sure I look very presentable. I still do that, but I do it from this room that's now an absolute mess, which is why it's blurred out. And I'm kind of being real. I'm being authentic. I'm being myself. I think sometimes it's very, very clear when people are using stuff that's so scripted that it feels impersonable. Or you've got people that are, this is the bit that really gets me is the AI written content. We've used it so much over the past year or so that you can see the signs of when something has been written by AI. And that for me is that screams to me, okay, you put a picture of yourself with it maybe, but you've not written that post. So I quite like the kind of the video content. I love that, the ability to be able to be myself. And I think sometimes when you're doing a video as well, you can make mistakes, and you've got a series of outtakes that you can use, that if you wanted to, you can say, look, this is me trying to record this video. It's not right 100% of the time. So I think trying to stand out is the aim of the game. But I think you have to be yourself.
I mean, I feel like I need to go dust off my ring light now, because we found in the past as well, video content obviously always works, and I think it is that real human element. I mean, my background is marketing, and so for me, it's what I think always stands out is when someone tells their actual human real life story, rather than, you know, just being like, these are a bunch of features, go try them out, I love them, or whatever. It's like, if you can tie it back to something that's happened, or why you started it, or, you know, that one piece that makes it more human and personal, I think that always really works. I always tell for instance, for Yo, we started it for several kind of ideas, but mine was always, I was actually targeted on a social media hack, basically, and it was someone impersonating me. And so that was my why, and I always kind of like lean into it a bit, even though it's a bit embarrassing sometimes. I'm like, oh god, I've got to talk about myself again, but it actually lands, and people really respect that you're open about things, and, you know, real, basically.
Okay, let's talk outcomes. What tangible impact has being active on LinkedIn had for your business? Clients, partnerships, opportunities? I mean, Sarah, how's that working for you?
I mean, even this is an opportunity, right? We found each other on LinkedIn from me posting and connecting via that platform. So for us, leveraging our founders and our anyone within the company, just empowering them to be brand advocates and having their own voice, I think has worked wonders for us. Whether it's getting leads for sales, or whether it's having opportunities like speaking or thought leadership articles, or, you know, anything like that. Or even I feel we've even had people reach out and say, can you give us a comment for this press article that we're doing? So for us, it's opened a lot of doors, and it's just given us, our business, a lot more visibility.
So that's all coming through LinkedIn, as far as you can see.
I would say LinkedIn has been the main source, and even for sales, it's been one of our main kind of platforms that we use. But yeah, obviously we have a few other things that we do. We'll be pitching press and things like that. But yeah, I would say LinkedIn has been a great platform for us.
Yeah, it's been massive. And I think I could say an answer very, very similar to Sarah's, but I think something for me is connecting with other thought leaders in my space and going, that's a really interesting take. And I would take that, put my framing around it, and then create my own article. And I might reference that in it, or I might sort of refer to it. But what I've done there is I've leveraged a community that's, we might then connect after that as a result, and we might say, what opportunities are there for us to collaborate? Could this be a long-term strategic partnership? You kind of, there's so many untapped doors that there could be. You could go into measures and metrics in a bit too much granularity.
I mean, you mentioned earlier someone finally understood what you do. Did that visibility lead to new work?
Massive. There was another one recently as well that I posted, and someone messaged on the back of that and said, Dave, I remembered your workshop you did for me years and years and years ago. I just couldn't remember your name. And then you popped up on LinkedIn and I messaged you. Fantastic. Like, if you're not visible and you're not there, people are going to forget you exist.
Do you think AI tools are actually changing how people show up on LinkedIn?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I always have this like ongoing debate with myself of like, am I becoming lazy, or like, am I just utilizing this because it's there, and why would I not? Because I mean, the level of output that you're able to achieve with the support of an AI is like twofold. Like, I mean, it's ridiculous how much stuff we can pump out now. But I would say that it helps, but I have everything from like Grammarly to helping me make sure I'm not making spelling mistakes to like Motion for my calendar and things like that. But for content, I would say, yes, I use it for ideation. And I have, obviously, I'm going to put my hand up and say I have used it for posts in the past. It's definitely something I've slipped into and thought, it doesn't sound right. And then I kind of almost get annoyed with myself and want to delete it. But I definitely would say it's helped me with my creativity and being more consistent and kind of pumping out things quicker than I could have before.
I think that ideation piece is probably the thing I use most for it. I would sit there and go, what shall I write about today?
Yeah.
And I'm staring at a blank screen and put it into ChatGPT and it'll say, here's 10 topical things you could talk about. Brilliant, thanks. And again, in the past, I would have gone, write a post about this for me. And I would take that and I'd go, I wouldn't copy and paste that directly because there are going to be bits in it I go, I don't agree with that, or my take's slightly different. So let's change that. I don't like how that's written. So blah, blah, blah. So you might have got the kind of the wireframe of what that post is, but then you add your own personality to it. And I think that's the key bit for it for me. I step away from that now and it is just purely ideation. It's kind of what can I create?
I mean, there's a danger, isn't there? I mean, that if you use AI to write, even, I don't know, a first draft, it immediately starts sounding too polished. Was that part of the reason you both stopped using it to write?
Yeah, I mean, especially for my area, you can really slip into like tech jargon and like terms that I question. I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, where did that come from? And then I'm like, okay. So my rule is now that if I wouldn't feel comfortable sending it in a text message to someone, or if I wouldn't feel comfortable actually reading it out loud and saying it, then I don't think I should be posting it. So I think there's also, it's very, it becomes very samey and I want to stand out. I don't want to sound like everybody else.
I mean, is there anything you do, Dave, to make sure your posts still sound like you when you've used AI for ideation?
For me, I try to add humor in wherever I can, and that's probably at my own expense sometimes as well. And I think for me, it's that being personable, being vulnerable a little bit as well. It's not showing that everything's always sunshine and roses. There are bad days. There are things that take a dip. So if you can relate to people like that and showcase that, we spoke about before hitting record here that we all wanted to take a drink. I did a talk back in March, and my voice gave up on me in a room with 25 people and 200 people watching online. And you just have to embrace it. It happened. You can't fix it. And I've posted a video since to say not everything goes to plan. And I've taken that little snippet where it didn't go right, because yes, the content left and right of that was great, but that's the bit there that some people might go, oh, poor Dave, he lost his voice there. And I think if you're trying to polish it too much, you won't publish anything because you're just going to be stuck in this kind of perfection mode. I think for me, that's if you can just be yourself and let your guards down a little bit. I think in a world of AI as well, that the talking out loud, the sentence that gets me is in today's business landscape at the very start, and I'm like, yeah, that's I would.
Sarah, you've said empathy and emotional intelligence can really help content come alive. I mean, do you think that the same empathy helps your posts feel more human?
Yeah, I think it's very much what Dave just said. I think it's being real. It's, you make mistakes, you can talk about them. You have a bad day, you can talk about them. It's just, being human. That's what it is. And that's what people are always going to relate to. They want that. That's, I feel content where the content that I share, that I'm giving it real, this is me, unapologetically, maybe I share a photo with it as well. That always gets a lot more impressions and a lot more engagement than just me being like, oh, I'm going to this event, or it's the real stuff that people care more about.
Let's get back to the theme of the summit, beyond the beige. What does beige look like in your world, and how do you avoid becoming it?
What a question. I think for me is there's a lot of people that do what I do, and they're out of the box, off the shelf solutions. So, you've got this problem, use this. And for me, it's all about people. It's understanding their wants, their needs, the problems, what they'd love to have in their business, maybe their life as well. It could be a work-life balance, and it's understanding that. And I think if you can be that person when you're posting content out and people get an understanding for your tone, even in the written word, they go, yeah, I get Dave. He gets me. That's the bit for me that makes me feel like I'm not beige. And I don't want to be one of these boutique consultancies that goes, yeah, we can do that for you. That's a day's work. And how long's a piece of string sometimes? You find that we need that one day, but we need some follow up after. And I think if you can bring that across in your content as well to really resonate that with people.
Sarah, what does beige look like in the cybersecurity?
Cybersecurity is, I don't want to say it's already beige, but it is like, it's not the most sexiest of industries, I would say. So it's, I think for me, it's a company that doesn't push their people in front. I think that staying safe, don't have like not having a voice of your own and just looking very similar to everybody else. It's very easy to just fit in that, playing it safe world. I think it's harder and more exciting for a brand if they put people out there, or maybe they've got an opinion that's a bit different. Share it. Don't be scared. Just I think that for me would be getting yourself out of the being beige. But I also think, I was going to just add one more thing. I think for myself, I sometimes find that, as I said before, some of my posts I might think, oh, they might become a little bit beige or whatever. Like maybe they're becoming a bit boring or a bit too playing it safe. And I always think at that stage, whenever I have those thoughts, I think, okay, let's go back to the why. Why did I start this? Why are we doing this? And that always kind of like reignites new, fresh ideas and ways and motivation to kind of get out of the beige zone.
So, what's one small thing someone could do this week to stay visible, credible, and human, especially with so much sameness and AI-driven content around?
I mean, I said it earlier, I'm going to dust off my ring light, and I'm basically taking your point, Dave. I'm sorry. But yeah, I think it's just putting yourself out there more and doing it in a way that's showing you and your personality. And it's not just content that's being drafted with a picture. It's actually you talking to camera and talking to your customers and connecting to them in that way. I think video content, real human video content, is going to really only ever increase and get more visibility for you.
That was exactly my thought. But why do you think more people aren't doing that? Do you think people feel scared?
It's a bit daunting, just talking to yourself on on a screen and putting yourself out there in that way. But I think once you're over that initial hurdle of like, okay, I'm talking to myself now, here we go. And, after you get over it, it's fine.
I mean, Dave, what would you advise founders who are looking to grow their visibility?
I'm going to take it a step further than what Sarah suggested. And I'm going to say just film a raw video. Don't worry about the ring light. Just record. You could be walking the dog. You could be sat at your desk, and you could just be, this is me. This is what I'm doing today. I did one at an expo not too long ago, and I had people walking past me, looking at me, going, "Wow, look at that guy filming himself. What a weirdo." But ultimately, I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it for my LinkedIn audience. And again, some people are going to be interested in it, some people are not. But the fact is that I'm there. I had to do about 10 retakes because I didn't know what I was saying, and it was just a bit garbled. But at the end of the day, don't take it too seriously.
What bit of common LinkedIn advice you ignore, and why?
I want to say, so I've keep on hearing mixed views on this, on adding hashtags and adding call to actions, because I did a LinkedIn training a few months ago, and they were like, "Don't use hashtags anymore." And then I was like, "But it feels weird." So I still add hashtags because I feel like it's what I learn, and even if someone tells me not to, I feel like that's something I always kind of ignore and do whatever. And I feel like a lot of people always tell you to always add a call to action, or always have a link, or always have something. And I don't think that you need to always. I think it's quite nice to have it as just a thought and leave it at that.
Dave, is there something you ignore too?
I agree with that. A bit of advice I was given recently, which I totally disagree with, is don't engage with anyone that's not going to help grow your business. And the point of that was coming who's going to buy from you. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't agree with that at all, because anyone could buy from me at any point. If I engage with someone to say congratulations on the new job role, they might go, "Oh, thanks, Dave. Yeah, I'm thinking about doing this. We might need you." And cool, brilliant. That might happen. It might not. And for me, I'm going to engage with who I want to engage with. If there's a point there that strikes a chord with me, then I'm going to comment, or I'm going to congratulate someone on a job well done or something they've achieved.
So it's not about the algorithm. It's about doing what feels right for you, showing up and overcoming the barriers.
Yeah, definitely.
Dave, Sarah, thank you so much for coming today. That was fantastic. You've shown that for founders, leading out loud is less about being polished and more about being believable. I mean, your stories make the idea of showing up feel much more human and much less like a performance. So I really appreciate you sharing so openly. Thank you both. Let's bring you back into the conversation in the LinkedIn chat. If you're a founder or perhaps a senior leader, what's one story you'd love more people to know, but you haven't shared yet? And it could be small or big, just name something. Next up, we zoom out again to look at trust itself and how to stay credible when everything online can look real. AI has made it easier than ever to imitate humanity and harder than ever to know what's genuine. Our next guest has been thinking deeply about that shift. Anita Vazelli is a fractional social media director, specializing in social media governance, security, and employee and exec advocacy. And she previously was global social media director at Ericsson. In this session, Anita talks about how synthetic media is reshaping credibility. She explains why transparency and clear behavior are becoming major trust signals, and how leaders can use AI responsibly while keeping authenticity at the center. Anita, really good to have you with us today. Now, I want to start right at the core, trust. When everything looks human, polished, emotional, even authentic, what actually tells us that a person or brand is genuinely trustworthy today?
It's not that easy, right? Today, as AI reshapes how we communicate and what brands and leaders trust, everything is being rewritten. So we have more tools to sound human, but a fewer to prove that we really are. So I think that that's going to be key. Like, how can we prove that we are trustworthy, we are humans, and not someone or something that is AI generated? And I think trust is not how things look, but it's how people behave over time. So behavior matters. And we trust people who show up even on bad days. They are vulnerable. Today I'm a little tired because I was traveling all day yesterday, but I showed up. So I'm being transparent. I might not be at my best today, but that's what it is.
I'm
We
sure
are
you will.
humans. And if someone acts with integrity, competence, and care, we care about each other. And AI can mimic that, but through consistency and over time, this behavior really makes a difference. So trust is built through consistency and not your content quality. Content quality, whenever you have typos, It could be AI, it could be human, but it's the consistent, repeated actions that really make a difference. And AI can replicate tone or mimics whatever, but it cannot lived experiences and accountability and reputation. And this is why transparency and repeated little actions matter today. So I think this is where it's going to make the most difference.
I mean, you've said for years that people trust people, not brands. But how does that idea play out today when AI can make any brand voice sound perfectly human?
When I see that phrase that people trust people, I just feel like a broken record because I've been seeing it for ages. But it's still true. And it started for me seeing it when it was brands. So when I was explaining that when we have a conversation like you and me, and the brand account would come into that discussion, it would feel awkward. Who's behind the brand? And it's just an entity. And if an expert or one of their salesperson or their executive joins the conversation, it changes everything. Because we are talking to each other like humans and not a brand. And maybe today this can be true to AI. That how do we know? And somehow we know that it's a bot or it's a human. And it's the phrases, it's the little mistakes. And only humans carry accountability. AI doesn't have accountability. So it can copy tone, but not responsibility. And we still anchor trust in visible, named experts. So we know each other through LinkedIn for years. I have been seeing your content, I know what you do, and that's how we met. And we built that trust together. Maybe we don't meet every day, and especially today is the first day when we meet like this. But it feels that we have been knowing each other because we have been engaging with each other's content. And in B2B, that trust flows through people. People make up companies and brands. And this is why it is important for companies that maybe a brand voice is AI assisted, but the face is human. And engagement, responsiveness, and transparency matters today more than anything that is polished. So you can automate a voice, but not accountability.
Can you remember a moment back at Ericsson when an employee's post or story earned more credibility than the corporate channel did? There's something you can talk about there?
Absolutely. It has been any of their shared experiences or thought leadership always outperformed any campaign. So this was one of the key selling points when I was looking at how to scale it, because I started with employee advocacy back in 2012, the really super early day. I feel old when I say it out loud that I've been working with advocacy for 13 years now. And that's when it just felt logical that to build up a social media account with the followers, with the right followers, it takes so much time, effort, and investment. If we take all that effort, money into our people, that was in that time 60,000 employees in that business unit, it's going to get more credibility. And that's what really happened. So it has been so many cases. And this is why I think quantity is not necessarily as important than the quality and what they put out and their authentic self.
I mean, that point keeps coming back, doesn't it? It just doesn't need to be polished. It's about bringing themselves to the post. And a business simply can't do that in the same way, can it?
No. You have so much more legal consequences, and most of the comms go through 5 to 6 departments. And by the time it gets out, everything is taken out. So, and it sounds like a press release or just pure marketing, and that might work 10 years ago or 5 years ago, but today it doesn't. It's really about what others need. They go on social to be educated, to read something that makes them think or be entertained. Anything else, we just had enough, and we don't want to engage with that.
A lot of companies still treat employee advocacy as a broadcast tool. Here's the tool, here are the corporate messages, press publish. What needs to change for employee voices to feel more credible, less scripted, and more human?
I think it has many layers because employee advocacy usually fails when it's controlled, and education is not part of or the enablement. Here's the tool, here are the corporate messages. It's super easy, push a button and it's out. And it didn't work 10 years ago, I tell you. I spent countless hours because for some people that was the easiest way, and they wanted to do good for the company, and they were spamming. And I remember when it was still Twitter, showing how the feed looked like. So I was bringing them that this is what you do, but this is how it looks on the other end. And that was kind of like the part of the education. And employee advocacy really works when employees are trusted. So first of all, building that culture. It's not controlled, but we trust these people. We train them. We show them where the guardrails are. This is governance. These are the processes. If in doubt, turn to me, turn to that person. And give employees principles, not posts. What are the main principles? What to keep? This is when like social media guidelines come in. Do this, never do these. And in between, show who you are, tell your story. And always take takeaways, that what is important for their audience. So it's human-centered. Encourage that they share lived experiences, not corporate. Like every data can be found through AI, through search. What cannot is what we think and the experiences that we lived, and how do we tell that story. And this is where I wanted to add what you asked earlier, that at Ericsson, these posts always outperformed all the campaigns. So it was super interesting to see that polished campaigns went out, like there were a ton of money, ton of time spent in branded, nice, designed materials. But these authentic voices always outperform them.
I mean, does that include psychological safety? I mean, people often talk about that, helping employees feel safe to show up as themselves.
Absolutely. And during these master classes or coaching sessions, they can also ask all the questions. What are their blockers? Many have different ones, or many times as we are humans, we have the same. I don't have the time, what others going to think. I never did a post, overthinking. And these are the blockers. And during these enablement or trainings, they can always come with their questions. This is my question. I don't know how to do this. I've seen this that many are doing. For me, it's weird. Do you think I should do this or not? And I keep saying that, whatever doesn't feel right for you, never do that. I also see that many people are doing it this way, but that's not me. I don't want to do that. And now as a consultant, I haven't written any direct messages that I want to sell anything, because that's not me. I cringe from that. I received so many on the other way. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And there are just things that maybe, business is slow. It's not slower, but I do things differently because that's me. And I think this is the most important part. And once you talk through employees around these questions, they have that psychological safety that you mentioned. They know that they are safe, what mistakes they can do. Many times I also give examples that they shouldn't be writing like, we do this at this company, because then it sounds that you are speaking on behalf of the company. I think this. Then you are taking that pressure already out. First of all, if you're not a spokesperson at a company, you just cannot talk about like, we do this. But I think this. here's a report, here's an article that I read, and these are my key takeaways. And then it shifts that conversation already.
So in your experience, I mean, when AI can mimic tones and faces, what signals should social listening or brand safety teams be watching for?
There are quite a lot, to be fair. And as AI and cybersecurity is becoming like more and more important, deepfakes are out there. Phishing scams are more and more sophisticated. So it is companies just have to be ready, and they need to be prepared. So we should have probably like clear AI governance guardrails, also internally at the company. Transparency about intent and not necessarily about like tools. They can look for signals like identical phrasing, a sudden spike in engagement, or unnatural tone shifts. So these could be teloways. Do we say that word, teloways? No.
Giveaways?
Giveaways, teloways. Oh,
Giveaways could work.
giveaways.
I like that.
You see, I've been learning English and I've been speaking English for a long, long time, and I still make
Brilliant.
up words. Luckily, it wasn't not necessarily. It's I'm innovating new English.
I see AI wouldn't have done that, you see, so you know you're real.
Yeah, so these are giveaways, not teloways, or signals that companies can look for. I think establishing these guidelines, probably by policy, governments, but also we usually know that governments are quite late with coming up with guardrails. It takes a lot of time. So this is when companies can come in and do it a lot faster than normal regulations. So establishing the AI guidelines, that what is human-led, where do we finish, and where do we involve AI? How do we work together, not as a replacement, but what are the things that we use AI and what are the things that we are not, or how can it work the best possible way? Because I think people care less about which tools we use, but why. That's what they care about. Why did we use them? And how did we use it? Transparency of intent builds trust, and deception breaks that instantly.
Do you think brands should publicly acknowledge when AI is part of the process? It feels like it's going to be part of everyone's workflow soon.
I think this is a good question, because I've been thinking that whenever I use any sorts of AI in my content creation, should I write it? But I mean, everyone's using AI. I think it doesn't necessarily matter that, I mean, do we use email? Like, or do we use, grammar correction? We have been using that. So we have been using some sort of tools to spot our mistakes, or, and I think the intent matters more than put it out there that I've been using AI. I think for visuals, whenever we think about the visuals or videos that can be deceptive, I would put it out there that this is an AI generated image, just to make it clear that this is not something that is from the truth. It's an AI generated one. But for text or copy, I don't put it out there, and I use AI. I really make sure that it sounds like me, it's my ideas, and it's not beige but colorful. It comes from my lived experiences. But for me, it helps to speed up the process, or writing proposals. I can write proposals less time than I could do that before.
Okay, so that's an important distinction. Visual and deepfakes can mislead, but using AI as a research or writing support tool is different, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. And I think because we say usually that we believe what we see, and this is not going to be true. as we move forward with the deepfakes. So this is where I think it's going to be super interesting to see that what are the guardrails? When do we say that this is AI generated or this is real? This is where I think credibility will also come in. That if I know you well and I trust you and I trust that these are the behaviors that you wouldn't do, and I see a deep fake when you do the total opposite, I would question it. But to be able to question it, I have to know you. I have to trust you. And that's when I might still be questioned, like, what happened to Andy? But then I might reach out to you that, Andy, is this really you? But of course, if people don't know you, then for them, it's like, I believe what I see.
So what do you think will separate credible brands from convincing fakes as all of this evolves?
Oh, good question. I think probably verifications. Verifications will need to be there, and fake ones will need to be taken away instantly. So this is where comes social media security comes in for brands. Whenever they spot any fake ones, they have to be removed instantly, because most people cannot make the difference. They are better and better. So I
They
think
really are.
verification is going to be key. Transparent identity, that who's behind that image, whether it's a brand or a human, because executives get impersonated as well, not just brand accounts. And I think content. That again, how do they show up? AI can mimic empathy and can support communication, but again, that experience, the lived experiences, are not there. So I think the differentiator will be showing up just like humans. Bad days, good days, doesn't matter. I'm just here. Many times these are the gym slogans. The most difficult thing is to get up from your sofa, or it doesn't matter how you perform, you just showed up. And that's consistency. And even those little steps may add up to become more than like big initiatives. And I also do believe that brands that build recognition through credibility today will be more resilient tomorrow and in 5 years. So in 5 years, your reputation will be your verification badge.
Okay, let's finish this with something practical. So if a mid-sized B2B company asked you where to start today in this world increasingly shaped by AI, what, 2 or 3 actions would you advise to help them start earning trust?
That's a good question. And I think many are still starting out. So for me, because what I've seen, that if we don't start with governance, then things build and no one knows what to do. And then it's going to become chaos. And then it's so much more difficult to put order in place than when we start. So start with the governance part, that define AI use cases and principles. What are the values and the rules when we use it, how we use it, and how we don't use it? Then to humanize the brand, really work with employees, executives, sales experts, and show their faces. Really put people into the center of that communication, and build a credibility infrastructure, verified accounts or clear processes, consistent behavior. So really work on the enablement, guardrails, rules and regulation, and then it's all about enablement and creating that culture of sharing, and then it becomes natural. And in a world of full of synthetic voices, I think the only thing that can be faked is earned trust. So when we earn that trust, that cannot be faked.
Anita, thank you. That was a really sharp and necessary conversation. Your point that trust is built through behavior, not branding, and that transparency can be a strategic advantage rather than the risk really lands strongly in this kind of moment of AI. So really appreciate you joining us today and sharing that. Thank you. Over in the LinkedIn chat, I'd love you to share what's one small concrete thing a brand or leader could do that would make you trust them more online. So next up, Nigel and I are going to take you behind the scenes of GoStart and share what we've learned from studying a lot of beige and the content that breaks out of it. In our penultimate session today, I'll be talking with Nigel Cooper, my partner in crime, co-founder of our AI writing coach, GoStart, and the person who's actually been building the platform for the past year. Nigel and I basically spent the last year obsessing over a single question. How do you teach AI to detect boring? Turns out it's harder than you think. Well, we finally solved it with the beigeometer. So, Nigel, could you talk us through exactly what the beigeometer is?
Yep. Hi, Andrew, everyone. Really good to be here. It's been a great summit today, and there's been some amazing insights and speakers, and we've still got Jack to come. But yeah, detecting boring. Like you say, our solution to this is the beigeometer. Although I think it's important to say, like everything else nowadays, it's an ever-evolving thing. Like the word solution makes it sound like it's final and fixed, but with the speed of AI changes nowadays, I don't think anything is.
No, very, very true, very true. So could you tell us a little bit more about the beigeometer and what it actually does?
Yeah, in essence, it's the beating heart of GoStart. It's a writing coach and authenticity scoring system, the real engine of the platform. So people can write their own posts for LinkedIn, or they can ask GoStart to write a draft for them. Either way, the beigeometer will then analyze that content to detect where it's generic and bland and beige, as opposed to bold and personal. Now that oversimplifies it, but in a nutshell, that's it.
Okay, so it offers advice on how to improve people's posts.
Yeah, and then GoStart can action those suggestions automatically and kind of rework the post. Or you can chat with it about the suggestions to kind of workshop the ideas and refine them together along with the GoStart chat before you action them.
Okay, so you mentioned it suggests improvements in a number of key areas. So could you tell us more about what those areas are?
Yeah, good question, because it's changed an awful lot. Even since we beta launched at the beginning of September, the criteria and the operation of the beigeometer has evolved drastically, changing week on week. Because to know what criteria to use to make it a truly useful writing coach, we had to know what beige actually means. And conversely, you have to know what brilliant looks like, because we're trying to help people write brilliant posts, not generic beige AI ones.
Absolutely. So it's worth talking about what beige means, isn't it? Because as we found, it's really not as simple as it seems. Working out what the beigeometer should judge was tricky, wasn't it? I mean, we had to go through a whole load of iterations to get it right.
Yeah, exactly. What should it be prioritizing? The LinkedIn algorithm, perfect English, minimizing AI tells like the infamous M dash. We all know intrinsically what beige content is when we see it. Generic enough to offend no one, bland enough to engage no one. But judging that with an algorithm is quite a different thing. Yeah, we knew we wanted to help people create content that actually contained something true and honest from the writer. But we also knew they were still going to be using AI. So it's hard. We knew what beige was when we read it, but translating that into an algorithm was just something else entirely.
Yeah, I mean, we went on this kind of really nerdy, obsessive journey, didn't we? Listing millions of things the beigeometer should be judging posts against and talking to people all over the place.
When you talk to people, I don't really like that.
Oh, yeah, right. You like talking to people a lot more than you let on.
Anyway, we digress. The point is, when we say beige, we essentially mean AI slop. But I really hate the term AI slop. It feels quite derogatory and, I don't know, a bit lazy to me.
I mean, I agree, but it all started when you used the term beige in one of your posts. I don't know, it seems years ago now. But we both saw it really resonated with readers, and I don't know, it just got me thinking. Perhaps there's some kind of ometer in that or something.
I know. And as soon as people started using Copilot or ChatGPT or whatever to churn out content without thought and editing, we started to see the beige on LinkedIn, and everyone's read it. Now, it's easy then to just jump on the anti-AI bandwagon, isn't it? Just say, don't use it, be done with it,
Yeah, I mean, we really did that at first, didn't we? That was part of our coaching, because for those of you who don't know, we also train brand employees to communicate on LinkedIn. And when ChatGPT first launched, which I don't know, what's that, 3 years ago now, we'd be there telling people to avoid it. Don't use ChatGPT. It's not a good writer. It won't sound like you. But as time went on, we realised that it was kind of a losing battle, because there's more and more employees on our training cohorts would tell us, well, they're going to use Copilot or ChatGPT anyway. So we really had to readjust our thinking here.
Yeah, exactly. The author in me hates AI, still does. I don't want it anywhere near my creativity. But it is different for business writing, even writing professional posts. There's no point pretending it's not there and that people aren't going to use it. And honestly, for me, there's no point then not using it, because you're just cutting your own nose off to spite your face, and other people are going to kind of excel ahead of you. So the question isn't about using AI at all. That horse has bolted already. It's how do we use it well? How do we keep our humanity in the process of using it?
Okay, right. So tell us more. What is the beigeometer all about? Is it about keeping your humanity?
Yeah, I mean, I know that makes it sound like really deep, but I think it is. Yeah. Look at all of the speakers at the summit today. The idea of personality and personal experience, it just comes up again and again and again. We've got to keep ourselves in our online content somehow, because if we don't, what's the point? And actually, what we got wrong at the start when we were developing the beigeometer, it was that our first versions were thinking about the algorithm too much. By that, I mean it was judging whether there was a picture or a video in the post. Was there a call to action? Were there AI tells there? And that's the feedback it was giving people to help improve their posts. But it improved it for the algorithm, but it didn't really improve it for the human. Then we added some things to see if the user had customized the post themselves or edited it, whether it matched their voice profile or if there was a personal story in the post. And that was great, but it still wasn't enough. Even when we launched the beta at the beginning of September, the beigeometer was still pretty basic. It was pretty much just that. But having user feedback over the past few months has just been so incredibly valuable.
Yeah, I mean, actually talking to other people has been so incredibly helpful, hasn't it? So I made it my mission this year to start talking to the smartest people we could find: writers, marketers, psychologists, creators. Like the voices we've heard at the summit here today. I've read the books, I've analysed posts. We've both gone down rabbit holes we're, to be honest, still not fully out of.
I feel like I'm in a big underground warren of rabbit holes I'll never break free from, to be honest.
Yeah, I can relate to that. But all that work fed into the beating heart of Go Start and the beigeometer. So after all that research and all that iteration, where did we actually land?
Well, right, let me talk you through where we are now. We quickly realized that if we wanted the beigeometer to be a genuine coaching engine in the heart of Go Start, it couldn't just be rules and checklists. Avoid AI this, avoid this AI tell, don't use M dashes, make sure they use a picture, video, etc. We knew we needed it to teach people, and it had to pick up the same things that human senses would instinctively pick up, because that's what the beige is, right? The kind of lack of soul that we all instinctively feel when we read one of those posts. So we landed on what we call the 5 human senses of great content.
Okay, so what are users actually seeing when they run the beigeometer?
Well, basically, when someone writes or generates a post in Go Start, they get an overall beige score out of 10, and then a range of suggestions and scores out of 10 for the 5 human senses. And it's not about perfection, it's about authenticity and humanness.
Okay. So Go Start evolved into a writing coach with a highly trained AI and beigeometer at its heart. So tell us more about these 5 human senses.
Okay, well, In the simplest way, it's trained to recognize patterns that humans will sense instinctively. There's a lot of NLP and pattern recognition running in the background, but what matters for users is the guidance that they will get for their posts. So firstly, the first sense is voice. Does it sound unmistakably you? So if your post includes phrases like leverage synergies or circle back, well, that's probably not your voice. Or if it is, I'm sorry for you. It's kind of language that you wouldn't use. So GhostArt will spot that and it will flag it and tell you to change it. But it's also worth noting that GhostArt has other features that help you to identify your voice, and it trains the GhostArt system in it. So the Beigeometer also looks at your actual voice for comparison with the posts that you're creating. The next sense after voice is emotion. Does your post make anyone feel something? Now, we're not talking about gushing or being overly vulnerable here. We just mean conveying some feeling, whatever you're talking about. Compare, I implemented a new strategy with, I stayed up till 2 a.m. convinced this wouldn't work, but then something shifted. One's a statement, the other lets you feel the doubt and then the breakthrough. That's the difference. The third sense is rhythm. Does it move like a human and not a machine?
Yeah, absolutely, because we've trained the system to evaluate things like structure, sentence variety, and pacing, haven't we?
Exactly. The thing about the beige wave of content is it's all structured the same way, same phrasing. Rhythm is how your writing moves. A human writer mixes up sentence length in a natural way that AI just doesn't quite match. That's why things feel off sometimes with an AI post. Our brains can just tell the difference, that lack of soul. Our brains can tell the difference, even if we can't articulate why.
Yeah, I mean, that part always fascinates me. It's not that there's anything inherently wrong with an AI post. It just somehow feels off, doesn't it? I mean, like you said, it lacks a human soul, and rhythm's a big part of this.
Totally. It's like those AI avatars that can't blink convincingly. There's just something human they can't quite capture in the timing. And it's the same with rhythm. We spot it. We know when it's fake.
Okay, so after rhythm,
Yeah, the Beigeometer then looks at story. By story, I don't mean you have to be a novelist, just that your post, even if it's short, needs to have some kind of journey. If it's just a statement, it's boring. So think about the difference between here are 5 tips for better meetings versus I ran a meeting last Tuesday that bombed. Here's what I learned and what I'm doing differently from now on. One's a list, the other has a journey. Something happened, something changed, something was learned. The Beigeometer will spot this type of thing in your post and it will suggest ways for you to improve it.
it makes a lot of sense. So, what's the last sense that the Beigeometer looks at?
Yeah, resonance. And by that, I just mean, does it connect beyond the scroll? Does it fit your audience needs and their goals? Does it work for them and not just for you? A really simple example of this is a beige call to action like, what do you think? Drop a comment below. But if your audience are consultants who pitch, you might say, have you ever walked out of a meeting knowing you didn't explain your value clearly enough? What happened? Can you see the difference?
Thanks so much for that roundup, Nige. Well, we're nearly out of time now, but hopefully that's given everyone some insight into our ongoing quest to crack the beige code with GhostArt. So, on a personal note, I'm incredibly proud of the Beigeometer and GhostArt. It launches properly next Wednesday, so anyone on the wait list will get early access from tomorrow afternoon. And one last thing, if you had to sum up GhostArt and its Beigeometer in one line, what would you say?
GhostArt's an AI writing coach that helps you use AI without losing yourself in the process.
Brilliant. Thanks again. That's it for Cracking the Beige Code session. We hope you found it helpful. You can find out more about GhostArt and the Beigeometer by signing up for the waitlist at ghostart.io. So before we move into our final session, I'd love to hear one last time from you in the LinkedIn chat. What's one change you would want to make to your content after today to move it further away from beige? Now, to close out Beyond the Beige, we're going to look at something that runs underneath everything we've talked about: emotional intelligence. Or we've covered creativity, originality, memory, advocacy, trust, and the beige code itself. So for our final session, we're ending with the thing that ties all of this together: how we show up as people. Jack Hubbard, founder of PropellerNet and Dream Valley, talks about what he calls the human algorithm, a mix of emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and empathy that still shape how we lead, communicate, and build relationships, no matter how much automation sits around us. So in this conversation, Jack explores why emotional intelligence still outperforms automation. He talks about how openness and self-awareness build trust and culture, and what it looks like to lead with humanity in this AI-heavy world. Jack, fantastic to have you with us here today. So we've spent the whole day talking about automation and sameness, but you've built your businesses around people. What keeps you so convinced that human connection still matters most?
Well, it's all about human connection. My life's all about human connection. That the best part of my work is the people I work with, and that's at the heart of my business plan, is spending time with those people and the things that we get up to together. But business at its fundamental is value exchange between people. Back in the day, I might give you a chicken and you get to eat, and you give me an axe and I get to chop wood and keep my family warm. And it's not about the axe. Might be about the chicken. Might argue it's about the chicken, but it's certainly not about the axe. It's just a tool that helps us meet our needs. And yeah, we live in a world where we have a lot more advanced tools than that, but they're still fundamentally tools that are there to create value exchange between people. So the purpose of my business, PropellerNet, and all the sort of spin-off businesses, Coverage Book in particular, and Dream Valley, the business I'm setting up here in the mountains, it's all about making life better. That's our sort of fundamental purpose, and that's all about human connection. So I was never the ultimate business person. I always felt I needed to hire people that knew what they were actually doing, and that was all about, okay, well, if they're going to come and work for me and give me their best years, then I need to make sure that I'm doing my best to give them the best possible experience. With that same philosophy, we sort of embody that within them to provide the same for their clients. So their clients are human beings as well. You know, they have jobs, they have career aspirations. They're looking to get a promotion or keep their job or enjoy their work, and we need to help them look good. We need to help them, you know, do better work and make their life easier so they can get home early and enjoy their holidays without any stress. So that's at the core of how we look after our clients. And then from a marketing perspective, we have to make life better for our clients as well. PropellerNet's a marketing agency, so you know we're not just in the business of clickbaiting. We're in the business of finding out what's a useful, meaningful experience that our clients can create for their clients, which drives some kind of positive experience and positive change for their clients. So at the heart of everything we do within our business, it's about creating value. It's about making life better. That's the mantra that we use. And all these tools, are just tools that can help us achieve that. Our values are quite human values as well. It's all about, so it's like well-being is like the very core of what we do, and fun. So we try not to take ourselves too seriously. We want to have fun, have a bit of a good time. Work can be a bit too stuffy and serious, and we, you know, by taking ourselves not too seriously, we have a better time. But also focusing on our well-being, looking after ourselves and each other. And for a long time, we've been doing all kinds of things around that with nutrition and yoga and massage, and to the point where we're asking our team, what are your hopes, dreams, and really trying to understand if they're going to stay with us for 10 years, what do they want out of life effectively, and how can we facilitate that. Our other values are creativity, adventure, and innovation. If you have a culture of fear where you're not having a good time and you're not looking after people's well-being, I think it shuts down that sense of adventure and it shuts down that sense of creativity and innovation. We've been going since 2002, and with that culture of kind of playfulness, it's the reason I set up the company in the first place. Like, I worked for a few other companies and they just stifled that energy. And we just wanted to create this work environment where we just let that energy just flow and bubble around. And it's really led to a culture of innovation where we've kind of like led the way from the sort of early SEO years, we were the first agency to hire PRs to do PR-based link building back in 2008, before anyone else had even thought that was something you could do, and that kind of set us up for the next 10 years, because we sort of led the market there. There was another guy that really wanted to build some tech, and we got behind him, and we built 2 technology companies, one coverage book, PR reporting tool, and Answer the Public, which pulls in Google data and gives you an instant snapshot of the of what the world is thinking regarding to a particular keyword area. We sold one of those, Answer the Public, because we wanted to focus that. We could have built that into a much bigger company, but we're like, you know what, we quite like our 10-person tech business. We don't want to be 20. The people that are running that business are really happy with that size. So let's sell that, take some chips off the table and just, enjoy a nice life. And that tech team, they only do a 4-day week. That was one of our goals, to get to a 4-day week. So it's very calm, no stress. We have no external investors. We're doing a 4-day week. We just work on the next sprint. And it's been going since 2011, that tech business. And it's now become the sort of like the gold standard for reporting in the PR industry. So I guess by focusing on making life better and human connection, we attract the right people. They stick around. They feel secure, and they're able to create value for our clients. And that's led me to be able to follow my dream here and live in the mountains and make life better for myself in return. So, and all of that's all through understanding each other and what our dreams are on a lifetime, and what do we want, how we want to live on a daily basis.
I mean, it does sound like you're building a kind of human version of an algorithm. Wellness, creativity, fun. I mean, you mentioned making life better for your people so they can make life better for your clients. So it's not just about growth. What can other founders or leaders learn from this mindset?
I think it's easier when you're independent, because you get to make the decisions. I think a lot of corporate-owned companies tend to be run by accountants and lawyers, and they distill things down to they see shareholder value only in financial terms. Really, there are some progressives who look at triple bottom line accounting, but mostly it's about money when they talk about shareholder value. And that tends to be the primary sort of business dogma out there, is like, if you're either one of those companies or you're aspiring to be acquired by one of those companies. So that's the mold that even small independent companies tend to try to operate in, but it's a trap. Remain independent and look at shareholder value differently. You're going to be working for a good chunk of your life. So rather than, sacrificing your kind of like the relationships and how you work and the projects you work on, rather than doing those because you feel that they're going to give you a financial return in exchange for hopefully an early retirement, a bigger house or a faster car, maybe. Instead, like, design that into the day-to-day of how you work and who you work with and what projects you work on. And then you can start to say, okay, rather than, if you look at the business in its entirety as a tool to make your life better, rather than just the financial output of the business as a resource to make your life better, then suddenly it opens up a whole world of interesting possibilities.
I'd like to talk to you about something you've spoken about before, emotional intelligence. I mean, everyone's talking about AI intelligence, but you've said emotional intelligence is what makes work better. What does that look like in practice, and how can leaders start building it into how they operate?
Yeah, I guess emotional intelligence, I guess it comes back to paying attention, like those first principles that we talked about at the beginning. It looks like, business is a source of value exchange. Business is a source of value creation. These tools are just a way to achieve that, and we've got better tools now than we ever have had in history. We've never seen the likes of these tools before. It takes an effort to create something, but now it takes less of an effort to create something. The more ideas that we have now, we can create. So we should be having this kind of golden age, right, for creativity and from that abundance, really. It just comes down to imagination, really. That's the human. We're the ones that are going to imagine what we want to achieve and what we want to create in this world. And I think imagination should be tuned into human need, should be tuned into emotional intelligence. What we want to bring, what do we want to achieve in our own life? I mean, for me, it's connection, creativity, contribution. Freedom's very important to me. So how, and it's not the same for everyone, but okay, so how can we use these tools to achieve that? But it seems like so much kind of doom mongering and clickbait. That's you only need to go onto LinkedIn, for example, and it's like there's a lot of negativity, and I think people are scared. I mean, even in propelling that, people are genuinely scared. They don't know what's coming, and that just shuts down imagination. In my opinion, I feel it sometimes. I'm like, oh my God, this is like, there's a pressure to check in every day to see what's the next thing, how things are changing. And there's this narrative, there's this kind of sense that, that there's this kind of wave coming. There's this kind of tsunami, let's call it a tsunami that's coming, and a lot of people were talking, I took a mini retirement in my 40s to explore them. I've moved to the mountains. I'm in the mountains now, a place I call Dream Valley, and I took a retirement because while I'm able-bodied, I want to become a mountaineer, snowboard mountaineer, mountain biker. I've been exploring the mountains. I've raised my 3 daughters who are now starting to go off to college one by one. So I'm actually coming out of. I thought it was a better idea to have a retirement while my kids were young and while my body was able, rather than in my 70s. But I'm coming out of that now at a time when this is happening, and I find it really exciting. I'm like, wow, okay, so we can do this and we can do this, and we've had these big competitors within our software market that have got infinitely more resources than we have, but now they don't, because it's no longer about the development resource. It's about the quality of the ideas and how well you understand your customers' needs, and we're really, really good at that. So I only see opportunity. But back to this kind of negativity, it's a shame. It's like there was this guy, people were talking about this guy, Dan Priestley. You might be aware of him, and there's many others like him, and a lot of his stuff's quite positive. But this one post that I saw, now is not time for work-life balance. Now is the time to be 100% at work, because it's an arms race. There's this tsunami is coming. You need to scramble to high ground right now, and that means doubling down on AI, because there'll only be a few survivors when this wave recedes. And if you want to be one of those, here's my course, sign up. And like 500 comments of like, oh, it's so insightful. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We've got, I'm thinking, hang on a minute. Like, we've just created like tools here that can automate for us. They can, you'd spend like half an hour writing an email. Now you can dictate it and have it done in like, in a couple of minutes. So we've got tools for productivity here, the likes we've never been before. And we're not able to, work a 4-day week. We're not able to take holidays. I was just like, that's really, really sad. So but it feels like it's, that fear, uncertainty, doubt seems to be selling. And that's my worry. I don't think that's emotionally intelligent. I think we need better, more responsible thought leadership from our business leaders. And if these people are held up to be business, and I say some of his other stuff, it's not all like that. It's just the first thing that I happened to come across. But that's not very positive. I think there's a much more positive narrative that speaks to us as humans, which is like, this is a golden age for creativity, and we've got tools now to be able to create the lives and the experiences and the products that we want in greater abundance. That's the narrative that we should be all buying into. And so, what do we want to create? What's the future we want to imagine? And so I think that's, for me, that's that's the way we need to look at it. I think that's an emotionally intelligent way to look at it. It's like, we created these tools. These tools are here to serve us.
So how can we use stories to change the narrative when AI can just generate endless content? I mean, is storytelling still the best way to stand out?
Yeah, I think story is really important. And as business leaders, founders, we need to write stories. We shouldn't be telling our stories retrospectively. We shouldn't say, yeah, this is what I did and this is how I did it. It is much more useful to project a story forward and say, this is what's gonna happen. When a screenwriter sits down to write a series for Netflix or a Hollywood blockbuster, they write a plot, they write a script, they decide who's going to walk on screen, they decide what they're going to say, where they're going to do, where they're going to go, how it's going to work, and how it's all going to play out. And we do exactly the same, unconsciously or consciously. So you get to choose where you go, who else is there, what you do, what the outcome is going to be. Life is just a manifestation exercise. So if you're, take control of your story, write the story down. How do you want to live the next 5 years? What do you know? Don't just show up for work each day and, fire out some stuff and hope things are going to change. No, write your story and, ask the people around you, what they want to do, and then build them into the story.
Unfortunately, not everyone can take a mini retirement or move to the mountains. But what can people do in their everyday lives to create the same kind of mental space or inspiration or clarity that you've described?
Well, the mountains give, get outside more, don't be stuck to a screen so much. Go and walk the dog, go for a run, whatever is important to you. Look, we don't work in these kind of linear blocks of time. Just got back from a trip to Greece and someone was talking about Chronos versus Kairos, I think it is. These two sort of like ideas and concepts of time. And Chronos has only come in recent years, and it's kind of linear time. It's the time that we count with the clock, and business has become obsessed with this, and our calendars and our diaries and our Zoom call blocks and holidays and everything is defined by the Chronos. But when we get into flow, when we get in the zone, time's different. Time flies when you're having fun, right? You get lost, and 10 minutes can seem like an eternity. And you get your best work done in this elastic kind of form of time, and that's very, very different. So if you use this Kairos concept of time, which the ancient Greeks that was the prominent way that they used to think about things. It's when flow hits you, it's when inspiration hits you. That's when you do your best work. So designing your life and your time in that way, I think is really important. If you want to have a balance, otherwise you're just going to be stuck in this kind of old world, kind of like, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, this many hours, and we're just not productive in that way as humans. It just doesn't work. So we have complete trust with propelling that. We have an office, but no one really goes to it anymore because we believe, we just believe in the sort of agency and autonomy of each individual to do that. So give yourself, I remember giving myself permission to operate like that after reading Tim Ferriss's 4-hour working week, where he just deconstructed the 9 to 5.
So how do you decide what to automate and what should stay human? I mean, is that something you consciously think about?
Yeah, I guess so one of our tech products, Coverage Book, is it's an automation product. I say it's not an AI, but it's just as much an AI, I suppose, as an LLM. It's a tool. LLMs aren't intelligent; they're kind of glorified autocomplete, despite their impressiveness. But so like in the PR industry, our software would have been a press clippings book before the internet. So you would get coverage for your clients in the magazines and in the newspapers. Someone would cut those out with some scissors and they would stick them into a book, and you put it on your reception and you say, like, here's all here's all the coverage we got, Mr. Client. That's how we're justifying our fees. But since the decline of print media, you needed a digital version of that. So that's what Coverage Book is. And before our tool existed, the way that you would do that is you'd have to go to different websites, do a screen grab of the image of the coverage that you got, and then use various other tools to try to find out how many people visited this website, how popular is this website, how many followers does this this influencer have, and then cut and paste all that into a Word document or a PowerPoint document, which is really boring, really sort of copy paste, like mind-numbing work. And it takes forever, and it looks a bit crap as well. So Coverage Book, all you do is you get that list of URLs. There are tools to help you find where those URLs are. We don't operate in that space. We do this part of it. You put your list of URLs and it spits out a beautiful report. It grabs the screen grab for you. It pulls all of the data. It gives you smart metrics, so that then you have a report that you can email. And that liberated. We get a message from our customers going, "You just saved me so much time. You've given me like a day back a week." It's just liberating, and I like that kind of automation. That's like, it's not fun work. It's annoying work. Someone has to sit there. They could be going home to the kids, but it's the end of the month. They've got to get the reports out, and they're there on a Friday night, not copy and pasting into a PowerPoint document. We don't need that kind of work. I think that's the kind of work that is good for replacing. So that's that tool. I think also replacing, as I said, like I like to move. So like I love having my ChatGPT bot with me when I'm out hiking. I dictate emails, I dictate ideas. I'd much rather be walking along speaking as opposed to sitting down or even looking at my phone and using my thumb getting RSI. It's a much nicer way to work. So I think automating those things is definitely a good way to go, and that frees up more of my time to what I call more of a free range human. The other tech product, we're building other tech products. So another really great use we found for automation is this vibe coding. We're full of ideas because we're a creative bunch, and because of the culture I've talked to you about. We value well-being, we value fun, so we're very playful, we're very creative, and we're very innovative. So we're a wellspring of ideas, no shortage of ideas. But of course, the bottleneck is like, that building that product is gonna, we don't have the resources to build that product. Now we have this amazing tool, vibe coding, where we can sit down and say, okay, this is what it is. This is how it works. This is a feature. I want this here. No, not there. Put that there. And you can just slip into that Kairos time that we talked about earlier on. And by midnight on a Wednesday, you've created a tool. I think that's great, because otherwise you've got to hire developers. It has to get prioritized in the chain. It's expensive and it's slow and it's costly. And actually you don't know whether it's going to be any good anyway, or whether anyone else is going to be interested in it, or whether it's going to be of any use to you, but it gives us an MVP. So I love that. I think, the ability to get your MVPs created quickly. And again, that pushes the value back up the chain.
Well, I think it all captures it perfectly. It's not about rejecting AI, but using it consciously, pairing it with humanity, curiosity, creativity. So if you had to summarize, what does the human algorithm really mean to you?
Yeah. And I think that's like getting back into that I love the title for this talk, The Human Algorithm. I think that's often the overlooked part. And it's all the things that we've been exploring. It's wellness, it's balance, it's nutrition, it's mobility, it's exercise, it's connection, it's contribution. It's all these things which help us to kind of self-actualize. And when we and that's the human algorithm. And if you're able to achieve that within your culture, then you move up this value chain into this kind of imagination space where you can take control of these tools.
Jack, thank you so much. That was really powerful, really grounded way to close today. You brought us back to something simple and easily forgotten. Tools accelerate, humans decide. Emotional intelligence, story presence, these are still the things which make the difference in how teams, clients, and communities experience us. really appreciate you wrapping up the day with us today. Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of Beyond the Beige. I hope you've enjoyed it and found it as useful and insightful as I have. I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of our guests, Mark Schaefer, Ashley Faus, Dr. Carmen Simon, Andy Lambert, Eva Balichova, Nathan Bennikens, Dave Stubberfield, Sarah Bone, Nita Fischelli, and Jack Hubbard. Thank you all for your time, your honesty, and your ideas. And thank you for being here, for watching, for commenting in the LinkedIn chat, and being part of this first edition of the summit. Now, this isn't the end of the conversation. It's the start of a movement. From here, we'll be continuing the investigation on LinkedIn with regular expert interviews, sharing roundups of what's working and what's not in this fight against beige, and opening up more about what we're learning inside GoStart. Everyone who's registered will receive the first edition of the Beige Code, a written playbook which captures the strongest learnings from today, plus some extra analysis from the GoStart side. I mean, our invitation to you is simple. Use AI, experiment with it, but don't hand it the keys to your voice. Keep your content human, your story alive, and your point of view sharp. So on behalf of GoStart and everyone involved in Beyond the Beige, thank you for spending this time with us. Stay bold, stay curious, and stay unmistakably human. We'll see you next time.